Good afternoon and welcome back to the Calaveras County Board of Supervisors meeting. Mr. Maurer, I believe you'll pick us up where we left off on number 5.
Number 5, yes. So this was a decision that we would allow more than one premise per parcel. I think we get into more detail on that later on, but just confirm that we were going to allow more than one premise on a parcel.
And we'll dig into that more in the later item under your questions.
Right.
Okay.
So then going to number 6.
Wait a second, let's just get through. Is everybody still okay with that?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Number 5, that still holds. Multiple premises. Well, yeah, there was no change in the.
Okay, because we can keep the score.
I know, just gotta keep track of this. Mr. Maurer?
So then number 6 was whether or not the board wanted to consider other license types other than the dispensaries or medical retailers that we already permit under Chapter 1791.
Outside of the
Callaway?
fact that I would like us to bring back 1791, but I'll discuss that later. I again want to bring up the idea of the use of distribution, that if you own a business and you want to take your crop or your wine or whatever it is to market, you can do that. And I don't think it should be any different for the cultivators. If they want to sell their product themselves versus go through another through a distributor, they can do that. Also, I don't know if this is where, and Mr. Maurer, you can correct me, but, well, you can't correct me because I'm a supervisor, but.
Can provide you advice.
Oh, your advice, okay. And I put in on number 6, I called it number 6A, whatever, a distribution low impact is low impact. But that if we wanted to have a distribution business, and that's your business, that it would be in the M1, M2, and M4 zones. So that's sort of two separate issues. The cultivator being able to distribute his or her own product, and I want to be a distributor for the cultivators in Calaveras County. I have, do it on M1, M2, and 4.
So I think those are two separate issues in a way, that there is the, and maybe Ethan or Julie can weigh in on the license. There's different license types, and I think you can do self-distribution, if I'm not mistaken. So if you're a cultivator and you want to transport your crop to a testing lab or something like that.
What about to a...
But if you wanted to have a separate distributor's license where you pick up other people's product and deliver it to the testing lab.
But if I want to sell my product to retail establishments as the cultivator, can I do that?
No. No, there's the state license system does not allow the cultivator has to send the cannabis to a distributor who then takes it to a dispensary.
So can I get a distributor's license if I choose to as the cultivator?
So I don't know, Ethan might know in terms of whether you're talking on the same premises or a separate premises?
Well, it could be, I'm sort of beyond my total job description here. So I grow the product and then I have it tested, or a testing lab comes. I have the product, it's been tested, it's sealed, and now I want to sell it myself versus going through a third party where I'm now having to pay more money to. Why can't I get my own?
The state license, and Ethan might know more than I do about the micro business license, which might be the one exception to where certain things can be done under a single license and for very small quantities. And I'll let Ethan speak to that. But for the typical or the larger commercial licenses, unless you're in a micro-business category, the cultivator, as a matter of state law, cannot be their own distributor or their own.
Of their own product?
Right. Correct.
Yeah, a distribution license is a separate license type, yeah.
I understood that, but why,
Yes, of their
I
own-
don't understand why I can't sell my own product directly.
Because the state says you can't.
Well, all right.
Because then it would
And I
put the
understand
dispensaries
about the
on.
license.
And so
So
like,
that's-
there's
I-
one exception, which is the micro-business license. And since I didn't know we were getting into that today, so I've researched the cultivation regulations, but if Mr. Turner knows more about how the micro-business license works, I can turn that over to him.
Okay. So that's one. And the second is allowing the business of distribution, which is low impact. I mean, distributors come into our county all the time, or they were coming into our county all the time. And now we have an opportunity, somebody can open a distributing business and be the distributor for Calaveras or whomever, because we're allowing them in, but we won't allow them to be a business in Calaveras. Seems like an oxymoron.
So perhaps the way to address this would be to hold the board to see if you want to discuss opening this up to things, to licenses other than cultivation. And if so, then we could get into the details of the types of license and what would be the appropriate zone. Well, and we may not be able to answer some of the questions because we haven't done
Okay.
that research.
Supervisor Stopper?
If we're to follow through with a use like this, I'm in favor of keeping the entire supply chain within the county. Distribution, processing, testing labs. I'm not willing to bring forward manufacturing right now. I mean, the general consensus right now is it goes boom. And even though we know there are other ways of processing, they're non-volatile, we aren't ready for manufacturing in Calaveras County in my position, in my opinion. But distribution nurseries do need to be considered as part of this ordinance, or a ordinance. Distribution gives local control for taxation purposes and environmental compliance. Testing labs are something to consider also for local control environmentally, and can also help special districts such as our water, environmental health, and other agriculture such as grapes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. My position on this, though, is that I believe the work that would have to go forth to include this in this ordinance would be quite a bit more extensive, and it's something we could move forward possibly separately later. I'm not sure if it needs to be included at this time, is my position. I do think it's a good idea. I do want local control, and having distribution centralized within Calaveras County gives us an opportunity to know what's going in and what's going out, coming in, going out. And it gives us access to the data that's coming back from the labs at the same time as the state does, if we put it into our ordinance properly. So it gives the county local control, not only for purposes of environmental impact, but taxation purposes for knowing weights and measures and so on.
So Supervisor Stopper, it's a good point, and I admit I'm not expert on distribution by any means.
I'm not an expert.
Do you want to take that on in this ordinance, or are you proposing that we wait?
My personal opinion, and staff can probably correct me on a lot of this, is that it's something that can wait a little bit longer as opposed to cultivation because it's going to come down the road just a little bit later on the process. So when it comes to some of the hurdles that we have to go through with the environmental impact report and so on, and if any addendums need to be made in the future, I think that it may be considered a little bit later on as opposed to right now. But maybe staff can correct me on some of that.
Well, I don't correct board members, but
No, I would appreciate your expert input, Peter.
I do believe that including other license types and uses would expand the scope of the ordinance and certainly add time to the development of the ordinance. Right now, we have an EIR for the ban ordinance that discussed a much broader regulatory cultivation ordinance, but to get into other uses that weren't discussed in that ordinance would require additional environmental review. So if the intent is to get something on the books in a relatively quick fashion, to expand it into other uses might challenge that timeframe. But, it's a policy call of what you want to do. If you want to go into other uses, that's certainly your choice.
Mr. Callaway, you have a question, or?
So, Mr. Maurer, if I'm a distributor from out of county and I come in and I pick up products here, you're not doing an EIR on me. So, but if I want to open a distributor business, I mean, I don't have any problem. I'm going to not take that off the table in terms of a business, okay? The point that I'm still I'm not clear on, if I want to sell my product myself, it's had its testing and da-da-da. What I hear you saying is that I cannot do that.
Under
I
state law,
thought I
that's
had
correct.
remembered reading somewhere that I could, but,
Other than through a micro-business license.
okay.
That is my
I'm
understanding.
just,
And I think, I know from talking with Ethan and Peter, we looked at the direction we had received at the first study session and prepared based on that. And since we thought we were doing cultivation only, we are not as prepared as we would be to answer questions you have of us, to the extent you have any, the other license types, but it's definitely a policy decision whether or not you want to add that now.
It's all right, let's see if we've got support around distribution. Supervisor Callaway, is it yes?
I'm a yes.
Supervisor Mills?
I'm not in support of any other license types at this time.
Supervisor Stopper?
I am supportive of them, but it's how to proceed in the best way and is what I'm looking at.
He's a yes.
I'm going to let him speak for himself.
Do you want to sit in this chair?
Wait till I
She would
study.
love to sit in my chair.
You can present your own opinion.
Yeah, I am. I can be supportive of it. But we can wait till after public comment to really nail out the final decision on it. But I can be supportive of working on it. I have always been supportive of adding distribution in it because of the local control that adds to it. But also that would include such things as testing labs and so on, because I do like the local control.
Supervisor Toffenali?
I don't think so at this time. I think we have staff's handful, just this ordinance right now that we were talking about for cultivation. I think adding any more onto it with the general plan coming, and I just don't see it adding more onto it.
I'm not a big fan of adding on to this either, but I think it's an important element. I don't know enough about it to frankly have a strong opinion on it, so I would like to learn more. Perhaps when we go about writing this, you guys will be more and you can take a look and something we can bring back and consider. But if it blows up the EIR and it has a whole lot of time, and it might be a step two, as Supervisor Stopper suggested, I would like to learn more. because I just don't know enough to make a decision on that. So,
I'm gonna agree with Jack. A step 2 is probably the best part of this process, and it definitely needs to be considered later. I think we definitely have a majority to move forward with it later, but let's be comprehensive on the cultivation right now.
okay,
Okay. So no change then at this point.
with the asterisk.
Yeah. I don't even write it down. So the next item, number 7, requiring a residence on the site. The board's direction was that we're not going to require that there be a permanent residence on the site. Any structures that are on, and I use the term be permitted, and that might have been just a broad generality, must be in compliance with Title 15, the county code as far as building. So there's certain types of buildings that are exempt, but those are probably not the type that you would typically see. Anything that's being used for processing, you've got employees in there, they need to meet certain codes. And so that's, I believe, what the board's direction was on that. Any change?
As long as they meet Title 15.
Title 15
Same
of
as
local building.
anyone else.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Mills?
Yes, I remember now Under Sheriff Macedo speaking to this very issue when he made his presentation, of saying it was important to have a residence or some way to get a hold of people on that particular site. Sheriff, do you have any opinions on this one way or the other? Because you're the one that's going to have to figure out who's where and what they're doing.
I'm not so certain that we have to have a residence on the site. I think the issue that Captain Macedo was talking, or Undersheriff now, Macedo was talking about, was the ability to contact somebody that is working on the property. So I think that if we have someone that is responsible for the property, because we know a lot of these owners are not in the area, they're out of state, we just have to have a name of somebody and a phone number that we can contact and be able to meet them on that site if we need to access the site or have an ability to deal with the site. The biggest concern that I have is on the environmental side, that we have a lot of workers on the site and there's no facilities. That's probably the bigger issue, more than having a residence there. So that's something you guys are going to have to figure out how you're going to handle, because that's a problem.
Well, he spoke to the delays in making contact with whoever was responsible for the site under the UO.
Yeah. We're having a problem contacting people if there is a residence on the site. You know, if it's an illegal site, it's just that. I can't think of any legal sites where we were actually having an issue with being able to contact people because they were trying to do things right. It's the other side of the fence. But still, if you're going to have a site that does not have some type of facilities for workers to utilize, then there's an environmental issue. That would be more my concern as opposed to having a residence on the site. I mean, we have, if you guys are going to end up allowing people to do multiple sites on a single property, you know, Bill over here owns, 100 acres. He's got three grows going on it. There has to be some type of facilities for these guys to use. I don't necessarily say that there has to be a house out there.
Okay, appreciate your comment.
Supervisor Stopper?
15,
Pardon me?
Title 15.
I'm sorry?
I concur with what they have written, no permanent residence needs to be there. I think a lot of the environmental issues and code compliance, if someone's, doesn't have the proper facilities, we don't allow, it to be on the ground as it is. And if someone's doing that, they're gonna be violating, code and possibly lose their license. So you better figure out how to get, somebody to ship out some blue rooms and turn them over frequently, because that's what you're gonna have to do.
Supervisor Stopper now?
Yeah, there's in the farming industry, there's state standards. You can't just send workers out in the field to harvest or whatever and not have hand washing stations and have porta potties and what have you. So I think that's what needs to be incorporated in here, is whether the state requires plus a Title 15.
And I would concur.
Okay, so it seems like we've consensus that there's no permanent residence required, right?
The next item was regarding camping, and it's sort of tied in with this. We do allow temporary campings on property under the current zoning ordinances, and those same standards would just apply. What we wouldn't want to see is sort of a permanent campsite set up, use of travel trailers or RVs and that kind of stuff that would be there on a more permanent basis.
So Peter, under county code, there's an exception with correct registration for butte fire survivors that's currently on code. That's not going to change.
That would not change.
Thanks. What are your thoughts?
How effective are we at enforcing camping and RV use on properties right now?
I'd have to defer to code compliance on that one. I know that there are, a long list of complaints that they're dealing with. I don't know how many of them relate to
And
cannabis.
I'm not talking about just cannabis farms. I'm just
Right, no,
talking
I
about
understand.
countywide.
Yeah.
And if we're going to write a law or have an ordinance in place that is not enforceable, that becomes almost a laughingstock. And this is one of those real sensitive issues where sometimes people, like in the Butte Fire Zone, they need someplace to live. But in other places, I think it's been horribly abused.
Well, I would say that, a place that has a permit of some sort, whether it be just simply a building permit or a use permit, or in this case, a cultivation permit, and we identify non-compliance, there's illegal camping going on, we won't issue that permit regardless of the type of permit is until that violation of the code is brought into compliance. So if there's camping going on, we would not sign off on the cultivation permit, or if we do a reinspection and camping is going on, we could potentially revoke that permit. So that would be the same thing that we would see with any type of permit that we process. So it would not be just simply cannabis growers that would be subject to this. Of course, if there's no permits, someone just has acreage out in the woods and they're camping on it, we don't know about it because we don't go out there, we haven't received a complaint, and I'm sure that happens a lot. But without knowing about it, there's really nothing much we can do.
I got a couple spots. You're here for a reason, I'm sure.
I am. As far as the camping goes, that was one of the things that was a very big problem. People parking motorhomes, sleeping in tents, and again, we're back to the facilities issues. The people that we found with the motorhomes were just dumping their sewage on the grounds. There cannot be any camping at all. I know that the county code says that you can camp for 14 days in a calendar year and not in one place, meaning one property, for more than that 14 days in any 30 consecutive days. So basically, they can be there for 14 days, and they have to leave to go to another property somewhere else, and they can't come back to that place for the remainder of the year. And it just goes back to having a facility for these folks, and if they're going to be staying on site, they have to have some type of facilities if they're going to be sleeping and living and tending to their farms. And I think that's where Captain Macedo was talking about having a residence on the property because of the facility issues. The camping, we're doing flyovers, so we're going to be seeing the mobile homes and the camp tents and stuff like that out on these properties. So we'll be able to deal with that along with working with code compliance. But they cannot camp on these sites, period. It's just not feasible. I know the county code, and Peter can correct me if I'm wrong, is that if you actively have a building permit on your property, you can camp on your property while your home is being built. That's a different story.
So we allow a temporary permit for under construction. So while someone's building a house, they can use an RV or a travel trailer for temporary housing
I think
under construction.
It's has always struck me that our current codes are sufficient. I understand what you're saying, Sheriff, But, then we're gonna start saying, if your aunt comes by for 2 weeks, I mean, we could start, I don't want to set up we've already got a second class of citizen we're dealing, that we're making people feel like, if we start saying, we're not even gonna let you park a van there or a trailer there for 2 weeks and stay within our code, I don't know, that seems.
I don't have a problem with them staying in the trailer for 2 weeks.
But if they.
It's after the 2 weeks.
And then that's a breaking of the code.
Exactly. And that's my point. That's, okay,
We go
maybe
by the
I
ordinance.
need to be a little more specific. It's not the camping part of it, it's beyond that camping that they continue to stay there. And again, it falls back to the facilities.
And that's covered for the most part in the existing.
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Stauber?
I can agree with camping and use of an RV will be prohibited except as permitted in county code. Hold everyone the same standard.
Okay. Supervisor Mills, do you have something else you want to add, or you
No,
want to weigh in on this?
let's weigh in on the same thing. We
Supervisor-
have a code in place, let's enforce it.
Great. Supervisor Toffenelli?
No, we have a county code, so.
Supervisor Callaway?
Fine.
There you go.
Okay. And then we decided that any appeals of the decisions on a cannabis registration application would be handled through the 806 code provisions rather than appeals hearing to the planning commission, except for a CUP where that already has a provision to go to the planning commission. Well, it goes to the commission already.
Supervisor Mills, you want to start?
How long are we going to drag people through an appeals process this time?
It will be moved forward and quicker.
Well, is
Yeah.
it going to be short and sweet, or is it going to be
Administrative
going out
process.
4 to 6 months?
Well, we are required to hold a hearing within 45 days of an appeal from the planning commission to the board. If we go with the conditional use permit, the commission would be the approving authority with the right to appeal to the board. If it's a ministerial type permit that the planning department would issue, then they would have a right to appeal that to a hearing officer provision set up through 806. And Ethan, can you tell me what's the time frame that those appeals typically take?
Those hearings can be set very quickly, and they can occur very quickly. In the past 2 years, we usually can set a hearing up within 15 days. And then, once there's a ruling, it's final.
So you could be, within 30 days,
Yeah,
through the
absolutely.
process?
Yeah.
Supervisor Stopper?
I'm fine with the administrative hearing process. I don't want to put our planning commissioners through what we had to go through.
Well, we had it too.
Supervisor Toffenelli, where are you?
Yeah, I think the hearing officer, once we went to that, it sped everything along, so Ethan was involved in it, so I'm good with that.
Supervisor Callaway?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Then, let's see, permit renewals. You had decided you wanted an annual renewal process.
Opinions? Supervisor Callaway?
I'm fine with that to a certain point. I think if you've been on good behavior or whatever, done everything for 5 years, we should be able to move to a 2-year, 3-year. I mean, we're continually making work not only for ourselves, but for the business, and I don't understand why we have to do it forever. I mean, without a cap on it. I also am wondering if development agreements would be in this process.
I think that's a whole different issue to deal with. Probably
Because,
discuss that on
well,
the second.
I bring it up because this board might be saying, yes, you can have a business, and in 2 years, there's another board, and the rug's pulled out from them. So if someone wants a development agreement, we're not. I mean, they're not unique to Calaveras. Could that be possible, and why would it be? I mean, I don't know why we have to go into a lot more detail in that development agreements. Staff makes recommendations of what should be in a development agreement with the developer.
So I see development agreements in, one, they are projects under CEQA, so we'd have to do environmental analysis of what that development agreement says. Development agreement should be an, a exchange of benefits between the county and the party that you're agreeing with. And so, you sit down and you negotiate. And typically, development agreements are used for large projects that are going to take multiple years to develop. A large, subdivision, specific plan development that maybe have a 20-year time frame for build-out. I'm not sure what benefit the county would get from a development agreement on a cannabis cultivation. We can change, the permits would typically run with the land. The renewal would just be to ensure compliance with the standards. The state law requires an annual renewal of the state licensure, so it's not that we're be doing anything different than what the state's requiring. So it's just a matter of ensuring that they're still in compliance with the provisions of our code. Certainly if the board is interested in considering development agreements, I just don't know what the benefit to the county would be in establishing those.
I think it gives a guarantee that we believe in you as a business to do things right. We're not going out and checking all the time. And that they are making an investment in Calaveras. They're paying their taxes, they're paying their permit fees, they're doing all these things, and what guarantees do they have? A development agreement could be for a specific, a 10-year period of time. Let's say we're going to invest X amount in the county with our business, and what guarantee are we giving them? All I hear is we are asking. I don't hear anything of where we're giving. So that's why I put that out there, Mr. Mauer.
So the other thing to consider with the development agreement is by state law, you're required to have an annual review of it and a compliance report. So the annual review is still required. Again, this is a policy call by the board, and it's up to your decision of whether or not you think this is something that we should consider.
And questions, annual review, Supervisor Mills.
Annual review, yes, with the potential, as you do with cars, of, going through a carb check if necessary. Something that might be looked at. Depends on just how good everybody is doing with compliance. But I think the board should be able to look at the possibility of having an annual review or a site review as part of an annual inspection.
Supervisor Stock.
I'm going to forgo commenting on development agreements right now. And there's other counties, I am for an annual review, but a review and a permit aren't necessarily the same. So like for example, Lake County issues a 10-year use permit subject to annual inspection and renewal. And I think a consideration with that, so that, we aren't going through the full process, but we're just checking the carb to make sure it's clean for the rest of the year.
And the thing to consider, this is different than under the urgency ordinance, where the approval, the authority to operate your farm was temporary. Once a permit is issued, it is an entitlement that if the code changes and we, changed it, those would be able to continue on as a legal nonconforming use.
Correct.
So just by the fact that the board changed the rules on them, they would be subject to the rules that are in place at the time that they applied for the application and got the original approval. I foresee that the renewal process would be, are you still in compliance? And if not, then we would process a revocation or work with them to bring them back into compliance would be our principal action, which is what we do with any other business or use permit. If someone's out of compliance with the condition, we work with them to bring them back into compliance. And only if that doesn't work, it's sort of a last resort, would we go towards revocation.
Supervisor Toffenali?
I'm in favor of renewal too. I own a business myself, and I have fire inspection annually. I have environmental health inspections annually. All of those I have to comply to. They come in and inspect. They look to make sure we're in compliance. All of our plans are there, escape routes, everything. Fire extinguishers are charged currently. That's just part of doing business, no matter where you do business. So I'm in favor of annually. It's just the way it's done everywhere.
So Supervisor Toffenali is a yes for annual renewal. Supervisor Stopper is a yes?
Well, the way I explained it is, yes, I am a yes for annual inspection and renewal. It's the permit that I was discussing, which is separate from just a renewal.
Supervisor Mills?
Yeah, I started with annual inspection and review.
Supervisor Callaway?
Yes.
Yes. Continue.
So the next thing was the transfer permits and the ability for someone who got a permit to then, sell to someone else. I believe that we agreed, or the board agreed that, that's a possibility, but of course, anyone that, acquired that new permit had to meet the same standards as anyone else, including background check.
Anybody want to change their position on that? Supervisor Mills? Your
No, it's kind of interesting too, because with a liquor license, you can sell it to whoever, but whether the ABA wants you to hold that license is a whole different matter. So, they're going to have to conform, whoever decides. It should be transferable.
Supervisor Callaway?
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. Supervisor Stopper? Transferable?
Yes.
Supervisor Toffenali? Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Then we moved to personal cultivation, and we had suggested, and the board concurred, that the registration process for personal cultivation really wasn't working. That there didn't seem to be any real benefit for that. And you agreed that we were no longer going to require personal cultivators to register.
Question is, we're still on board for letting people not register?
Yes.
Supervisor Mills?
6 plants, yes.
Supervisor Stopper?
Yes, as put in state regs.
Supervisor Toffenali?
Yes, for state regs, like Supervisor Stopper.
And so then we also, the ban only permitted indoor cultivation for personal cultivation, and the board had agreed that outdoor cultivation would be okay, but you wanted to have a setback established. There was some talk about, I think it was 150 yards or something like that, and that would limit where people could grow. I'm suggesting that if 75 feet is appropriate for commercial cultivation, then maybe 75 feet is appropriate for personal cultivation. We could also limit it by zones. There may be zones where you don't want to see it. So I think that's another area of discussion that the board should have as far as where the personal outdoor cultivation should be allowed, and how great a setback would be necessary to protect the neighbors.
Supervisor Callaway?
Well, I look at it a little bit different, Mr. Maurer. I'm thinking, and I can only use areas within District 3. I live in Fieldstone. There are townhouses, and we have backyards. Why I can't have one plant? I mean, I can have 6 under state law, I'm just saying that, but the county's going to allow me to have one plant in my backyard. Okay, I live in Meadowmont, and I have 1/3 of an acre. Maybe I'm allowed to have 3 plants outdoors. Or I have 2 acres, and then I can have 6 plants outdoors. So we're saying, oh, they have to be indoors, and I have a studio apartment. I'm allowed to have 6 plants. I'm living in an apartment or a condominium. I mean, instead of looking at the environment and where the plant is grown, look at, is it a condo apartment, the townhouses, a third of an acre, or what have you. I mean, I just think we need to look at it differently, because if you do 75 feet, that's going to take out a lot of area, and I think they should be allowed to be grown outdoors. So we're just going to limit it by the number of plants you could have. We're not saying you can't have 6. We're just saying in Calaveras, if you live in Fieldstone, you can have 1 plant outdoors. Where you put the other 5 is up to you, indoor. Or if you live in Pine Brook and you have 2 acres, you can have all 6 of your plants outdoors. So it's just sort of another way of looking at it.
Supervisor Mills? I'm sorry, you're done.
I think we go outdoors, we're going to start rubbing up against neighbors again and creating another problem, so I'm not in favor of it.
Supervisor Stopper?
State regs along with the planning 75-foot setback.
Supervisor Toffenelli? Where you at?
Not outdoors. It's going to create too many problems. Too many problems.
I'm gonna just, I really
Supervisor Pollak?
I understand that, because I have a neighbor who's growing and putting his 6 or 4 plants outdoors. And it's during, when they're in harvest, yeah, it stinks. But at the same time, I live in Fieldstone, or I live in a condo or an apartment, and I'm growing my 6 plants, it's still impacting my neighbors. So we're not going around checking every single residence in Calaveras County that is growing. They're allowed 6 plants for personal use. And so we know that people are putting their 1 or 2 plants outdoors. And then to say, well, they can't do it, what are we going to do? Go tear up 2,000 houses that they're growing their plants outdoors? I guess I look at it, it's not realistic. I don't know how we can enforce it, including the plants that are grown in Fieldstone, the 1 plant in the back patio.
I think Marie's got a very good point,
Yeah.
and I'm not quite sure how to solve that one. But at the same time, a lot of our complaints were neighbor issues. You know,
But were they personal or were they commercial?
it could have been, I don't know, could have been both.
Yeah.
But, so I don't know how to solve the problem that you're speaking about, Marita. So I'll go with state regs and 75. Ben, you had a statement?
Well, the setback would be it. 75 feet from both lines, that's 150 feet. If you're doing a needle in the middle of the property, that's 22,500 square feet. That's just over half an acre. So that's where we're at a point where half an acre, you're gonna have to go indoors if you're gonna do your personal 6 plants. There's never gonna be perfect solve. There's always gonna be that neighbor that wants to tell everyone else they can't walk their dog to the edge of the property and let them go to the bathroom. But we do have mindful, because property rights are a double-edged blade. They cut both ways. We have to have respect for someone else's right to live without being impeded on the way they want to live. So it comes down to is, I believe that the indoor rule is overreaching and pushing people to do something that even in the last board's own words was creating a fire hazard. And they said, you all have to file for a permit because you're putting a fire hazard in your house that we're requiring you to put in your house. And none of these people filed for a permit. I mean, very few did. You know, I walked around during the election. I hit over 1,000 houses personally canvassing in Rancho Calaveras. And I'm telling you, there was a lot of people growing in their yard. You know, and I don't think the sheriff has the time to go out and check everyone's 6 plants. You know, I think we're being over onerous here. I think that 75 foot puts on half an acre, and I don't think really 6 plants on the 100 square feet or less impedes on people's own lifestyles next door. So state regs, 75 foot setback.
Mr. Mauer, I have a question. That's 75 feet from where to where?
From the plants to the property.
So why
plans to
not
property.
set, if the issue, why not 75 feet from the premise on the adjoining property to where I'm growing my plant?
Well, I think the issue here is the neighbors' enjoyment of their property. And if they've got an outdoor patio right up against the property line, you know, the idea is to separate the odors from the plant to the adjacent property.
If the guy wants to mow his lawn on the edge of the property,
So-
he can.
Can a homeowner, an HOA restrict that people cannot grow a cannabis plant for their personal use?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Per state law, no. The state law says anybody's entitled to grow their 6 plants. We can only tell them they have to move them inside where they won't get a permit to.
The HOA can do that.
So, Julie?
State law says that, and I'm not going to speak for HOAs, I don't know what HOAs can or can't do because I don't represent HOAs. We can't prevent people from having 6 plants indoors. And to be honest, I haven't looked at the state law in terms of what happens if you choose to live in a subdivision that voluntarily imposes different rules upon itself. I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay, just, thank you.
Supervisor Toffenali.
Yeah, I want to address some of the issues that are being brought up by Marita and Mr. Stopper. First off, there's people that are camping on their properties. There's people with junk on their properties. There's people with old cars piling up on their properties. Those are all violations. Those are all code violations. Same way with the plants. We say they're indoors or growing in outdoors. We don't have code officers scouring everywhere, looking at everything. We get complaints. And then when we get the complaints from the neighbors, then we go out and investigate it. And that's just no different than any other code violation or anything else, whether you're growing a plant outside and you're not supposed to, or you got a piles of trash out on your property you're not supposed to. That's how it's dealt with here. We don't have a number of code officers to scour the county looking for violations continuously. It's on rather a next door neighbor or neighbor down the street or somebody that doesn't like you calls in and files a code complaint. That's how it's handled. So, you know, the issue about whether you walked for 1,000 people growing up, they may be. Did you count any people who have cars piled up or so forth? I mean, it's no different, in my opinion. So.
Supervisor Mills?
No, he explained it. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
okay, I was on.
Thank you.
Okay, so I don't see resolution yet on this one. Do we have 3 votes out state? Supervisor Stopper and I suggested state regs, 75 feet outdoors, okay. Am I reflecting that correctly, Supervisor Stopper? All right. Supervisor Callaway is not there yet, not there. Supervisor Toffenali? No? Supervisor Mills? No.
So if the 3 of us say no, what is it that we're saying?
We don't know what to write.
That's right. Don't know what to write.
Staff would like the board to keep talking.
So, all right,
Wait a minute, that's not true. Then the direction would be what we have right now is ordinance.
6 plants indoors.
It would stand.
Plants indoors is what it would be.
oh, well, if that's my option, then I'll go with 75 feet and outdoors.
State
Okay.
regs. Say
Peter,
state
moving on.
regs, Marita.
Next one.
State regs.
All right, we've now accomplished what we figured out last time. Move forward.
All right, so, yes.
I know
the questions
this
we
is
did
getting
get to.
long for everybody. There's a lot of thoughts. Stick with us.
And we discussed this to some degree already, and this had to do with the discretionary permit. I think we've come to the conclusion that conditional use permit is appropriate. Was there any further discussion on item 14?
Second.
Any further discussion on item 14? Our recommendation was that we don't go down the use permit process. You decided that's appropriate in the, for the in-between parcels of 10 to 20 acre parcels. And then someone who wants to rezone their property, that's also an option. Was there any further discussion on this issue?
I think it's all addressed in number 3.
Supervisor Mills?
I see it addressed in number 2C, the no RR.
Okay. Anybody else have concerns or feel we haven't addressed those issues?
So then we moved to co-location. There was a decision to allow for co-location. We need to sort of iron that out a little bit more as to what's the minimum parcel size, how many sites, and do you want to have a cap on the number of co-located premises?
Supervisor Mills, you want to start?
No?
Your light was on, so Supervisor Stopper.
Around the state, other jurisdictions are recommending a minimum of 40 acres for co-location. Other than this, the scale recommended is agreeable. I think starting them at 20 is too small, and will start impeding. It would be hard to fit what we're doing on 20 acres. I think we should move it up and the scale, and I think there's a maximum set forth by the state to some end. I'm not totally sure or recall exactly what I read. It's been a while, but it may be somewhere in this vicinity of 4 per 100. I'm not, but I could be mistaken again, so, but that's something to consider as we're riding forward. We don't want to.
Mr. Mauer, under the rule, under the direction we just gave prior, the minimum acre of 20, so any co-location would have a minimum of 40.
Correct.
So we might have already gotten ourselves there.
Just
Am
want to
I
make sure.
am I doing that right?
Yeah, that's the way I would see that. So if you had, it's basically one premises per the acreage allotted for cultivation. So if you had 20 acres, you could do 1, 40 acres, 2, 63, et cetera. And that seems reasonable. Then the question then would be whether or not you want to cap it. Is it 5? Is it something else?
Supervisor Stopper, your light's still on. What do you think?
Well, here it says 2 premises on 20 acres, 3 on 30.
Well, that was based on the 10 acre minimum
Okay.
parcel size from previously.
Okay, that's why I brought forth 40 to start. I think at some point, every so many acres, I'm not sure if the state or if you're able to find anything on it has a cap.
I'm not aware of any state law cap on co-location.
Okay. Then I'll pass it on for someone for further discussion as of right now.
Supervisor Callaway?
I support staff's recommendation.
Supervisor Mills?
As a policy matter, we can put a limit on it. We don't have to be held to whatever is open-ended here. So if we say 5, or, that gives the sheriff and our code enforcement people and everybody else a chance, if there are co-located properties, to look at it once rather than look at multiples, so it might help to some degree, but I think when you get into larger than 5, it's going to create a whole nother dynamic. So I'm picking 5.
Supervisor Stopper?
What does that apply to? Because if you say 5, if someone owns 700 acres, is that 5 for every 100 acres, or is that 5 for one?
For total. And that's,
For a total, it doesn't matter if the land's 700 acres or 200 acres?
right. It says graduated scale cap
I
at 5.
cannot, then I cannot agree with that. I would suggest that we do a cap per 100 acres. And go with that, because if someone chooses to buy 700, 800, 1,000 acres, they could put as much grapes on it as they want. But, the cap should not be there except for per 100 acres.
Are we talking about a contiguous piece of property, or are we talking about a
Continuous.
parcel?
Conti-
A parcel.
A parcel.
Because if you've got, and how are we going to break that out? So let's say I've got a 100-acre piece, 200 acres, pieces next to each other. We count that as 200 or as a 100-acre parcel?
It's 2 separate parcels,
I would agree, but,
and we have a lot of those.
but if you got a 500-acre parcel, do you get 5 different 100-acre allotments, or do we cap it? I guess that's your question, right?
That's a policy call.
That's
You
the
want to put a
question.
cap
That's
on
the
it,
Right.
if it's
That's
unlimited,
my
then if you had 1,000 acres, do the math, that would be 100
We have a
premises.
moratorium.
Come on. So the question is, okay,
50.
so, for that person with a 300-acre parcel, are they going to be capped at 5? Or a 100-acre parcel for this case? Is that right?
Right, so anything over 100 would still be 5.
I would like it per 100 acres.
Supervisor Mills, you have
Yeah, I would say it's capped at 5. That's staff's
Per 100 acres.
recommendations here is 5.
I think per parcel, I think you got to cap it. Otherwise, you're going to end up, some of these big parcels could end up with 20 acres under cultivation or more.
That's right.
And then you're dealing with it's just a big impact.
Thank you.
I'm with 5 continuous parcel, 5 on any continuous.
On a parcel.
Yeah.
So if you've got 100 acres, you can have 5.
I would agree.
All right. There's 3.
And then the next question associated with that is, are there any limitations on the zoning for co-location? You want to do it the same as that for a single premise, or do you want to limit it just the more direct agricultural resource zones?
I'd like to see this stay in ag and GP, A1,
So for co-location, ag and.
A1, AP, and GP.
I would agree with that.
Supervisor Stopper, where are you at?
With a lot of the use switching over to either A or GP or, and so on in the future, I would like to add U to that, especially with the 40-acre minimum being there already.
So would we be excluding RA from co-location? Is that what you're thinking? Supervisor Stopper?
Yeah, as of right now, yes.
Supervisor Callaway?
I want to include unclassified and RA.
I'm going to come in, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just going to put 100 acres for unclassified and 100 acres, which it would be for RA.
I'm going to come in saying the zones that were allowed minus RA for co-location. I think RA starts getting into
So what about
another zone.
U included. So you can have co-location, what's the list here?
So the A1, AP, GF, and U for co-location, but not RA.
Yes.
We need 3 votes for that.
Yeah. Is that everybody on? Carrie, Ben, Dennis?
Yeah.
Rita? Wow, 5-0.
Is that the first one today?
I don't think so. It's impressive. It's a win. We're going to celebrate.
What, do I get a cookie now?
When we get 5-0, we're going to like, who? Peter?
Okay, so then moving on to indoor cultivation, under the urgency ordinance, it was permitted in the industrial zones, all 3 industrial zones. You can mix and match, you can choose all 3, it's up to you.
Supervisor Callaway?
If I have an RA or I have an A1 property and I can do a multiple premise, why can't I pick and have to say, I want to do an indoor grow on my acreage in addition to maybe an outdoor grow? Or I just want to do an indoor grow on my, my 20 acres. I mean, if we're restricting it to just the M1.
That actually gets to question number 18. Yeah. So we're looking at sort of the industrial use under the urgency ordinance, but we also, as I indicated in my report, there were some agriculturally zoned or
That we could,
that also had an indoor cultivation component to their operation. And so that would,
so 17B would address that.
so what I'm looking at right now is just, do we want to allow it in the industrial zones? If so, which zones? And then do we want to establish what limit would we have for indoor cultivation on industrial zones? And then the next question would be, do we want to allow indoor cultivation
Oh,
as part
okay,
of?
my apologies.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's
I'm
okay.
a yes.
Are there any indoor zones here, Mr. Bauer, that would be more appropriate?
I think the 3 industrial zones that we allowed under the ordinance is appropriate, in my opinion.
If we added commercial, it would be on the streets.
No, I don't want
Let
to.
me, let me ask you a quick question. Supervisor Callaway, you're saying yes to the staff recommendation,
For all
which is up
3.
to 10,000 for all 3?
It's just
Under
what's
the UL.
for 17A.
17A is 3.
I'm saying all 3,
Yes.
all 3.
Supervisor Mills?
All 3.
All 3.
Supervisor Toffenali?
All 3.
5. All right,
Who did
our
that?
second one.
And then what size? Under the urgency ordinance, it was 5,000 square feet. I believe that the licenses that are being permitted by the state can go up to 10,000 square feet.
Mr. Mauer, I thought I read in the staff report that it said 10,000.
It says, yeah, right.
Under 17B,
That's state, yeah.
it says staff recommends, et cetera, and the maximum was up to 10,000, a small indoor state. Staff recommends that this limitation be retained.
I guess I
Last
just,
sentence.
highlighted the wrong section there.
Aha. So are you saying 10,000 or are
If
you
that's what we
saying?
had under the urgency ordinance, I would say yes, we might as well keep that. I don't know that we had any complaints associated with indoor cultivation on industrial sites, and so it didn't seem to be as big of an issue as we had with the outdoor cultivation. So I would recommend that we go with that.
You recommend 10?
10.
Okay, yes.
Did we have any 10,000 at the time?
It's a lot of building.
That's a lot of building.
But it's not good.
I don't recall anybody actually hitting that number.
The retainment of power to be able to facilitate that right now is a whole nother hurdle. So, I mean, you can say, yeah, go ahead, go for your 10.
Three-phase.
Whether someone's going to be able to attain 3-phase and get that to their property is going to be a whole nother issue. So shoot for it.
Supervisor Mills, where are you at?
If they can do it, if they can get it done in 10,000.
All right. Supervisor Stopper?
10,000.
Supervisor Toffenali?
10,000.
Damn. 5.
Yeah, one of us is going to throw you a curve here pretty soon.
I expect a curve any minute. We never run last month.
Okay, so then we move back to the issue that Supervisor Callaway had brought up as far as the ability to do indoor cultivation on non-industrial zone where we allow outdoor cultivation.
Sure, Callaway, you want to state your position again? Or
I'd
feel like it's up
I'd like to add RA.
Well, it'd be the same, the recommendation right now is that you allow it on the same zones you allow outdoor cultivation.
Oh,
meaning
can
the
I
same-
sneak in RR on this one? Because it's going to be indoor?
That's up to your colleagues.
In Forest Meadows only.
Fine with me.
Thank you, Gary.
Comment of the day.
Yeah, you're behind the
All right.
gate, too.
Supervisor Mills, where are you at?
Same as outdoor. No RA, no RR. But I don't know if we need to add U in there because that wasn't.
So what do you say, you are
We're
indoor
gonna add you.
cultivation on those ag properties?
Yeah.
Everything that we approved before.
Supervisor Stopper?
I agree with everything we approved before. It has less of an impact on neighbors if it's indoors, and to be able to facilitate the power, that's a whole nother issue in itself, so good luck.
Supervisor Toffenali?
Yeah, and the ag's fine.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of putting buildings all over the place, but I think Supervisor Stopper's got a good point. It's a hell of a hurdle to get over.
It is, but we would allow barns on any other ag property, so.
There we go again, 5.
So just to clarify, that was on just the ag zones or on the,
Well,
basically
indoor
the same
cultivation-
as you're allowing for outdoor cultivation? Okay.
Well, we said, hang on a second. Okay, thank you.
So then the next issue is regarding sensitive uses, and the state has identified what they have as sensitive uses: schools, daycare, youth centers. There could be other sensitive uses, and there's been discussion in the past as far as bus stops and churches and parks. We would need to clearly define them in the code, but I think that parks might be something that where children would congregate, and there might be a concern about having cultivation, outdoor cultivation that close. So that's a policy call for you. Turn it back to you guys.
I mean, it's not the kids that are grousing about the smell of cannabis, it's the adults. So maybe we don't want it next to shopping centers or wherever adults go. I'm fine with adding parks and as staff recommended, and that's all.
One of the big rubs in my district was bus stops, and they don't move. I mean, year over year, they're generally in the same location to the point where I now have signs installed before and after bus stops, so. And it wasn't the parents that were grousing about it, believe it or not, it was the kids. So I would like to see the bus stops in there, along with the parks.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with Supervisor Mills. I had complaints about bus stops, Person Road, other areas, Pettinger.
And the next question would be the distance, but Supervisor Stopper, where are you on this?
I'm in agreement with their recommendation as it sits with public parks.
I concur. Keep it out of parks.
Okay, so
Next question is the distance? Is that a
Yes.
question?
Well, wait a minute, those
So-
bus stops,
No,
No,
bus stops, no. Supervisor Stopper, bus stops. Toffenali, Supervisor Toffenali, you were for bus stops. It's 3-2.
great. And then the other next question is the distance. 600 is the state standard. It's 1,000 feet under the urgency ordinance. You also have 1,000 feet separation under the dispensary ordinance.
I'm going state standard, more we can go with the state, the easier it is for everyone.
Well, since we're already at 1,000 feet for 17.91, this would keep a uniform standard throughout the county for it, so I would stay at the 1,000 feet.
Supervisor Stopper?
I'm fine with 1,000 feet. I mean, no one's, should be within that now, so.
Supervisor Toffenali?
I'm good with 1,000 feet.
I am too, 4-1.
Okay, then the next question related to that is, where do you measure it from? Is it measured from the property line, or do you measure it from the premises?
From the premise,
And if there's co-location, be measured from all of the premises.
Whose premise? Whose
Well,
premises?
The cultivator is responsible to ensure that they are 1,000 feet away from a sensitive use. And so they would need to locate their premise 1,000 feet away from that use.
As long as we maintained that before, that's a standard that's already been basically set. Why would we change it?
because,
Well, the difference is between whether it's from the property line or the premise. The previous requirement was from the property line.
And my suggestion is don't make it good one way in one ordinance and then make it different in another one.
We need to fix the UO.
We don't have a UO.
I know, but if you said the UO wasn't good in the
No, I'm
past.
not talking about the UO. I'm talking about 1791, sir.
Okay.
So Supervisor Mills, you want to go from the property line? Anybody else want to weigh in? Supervisor Toffenali? We always change it.
Well, when you're talking about schools and other things, you have to, it's not from the premise of the school, it's from the property, the state property, going to where the actual activity is going on. So I think it has to go from a property line.
It's not that the sensitive use has to locate away from, it's where the cultivation site is located, so it's measured in that direction, not where. So,
Supervisor Stopper? I'm sorry, go ahead.
I think Mr. Maurer, and correct me if I'm wrong, is saying that it would be.
You can correct her, she's not a supervisor.
So that we would be looking at the licensed premises boundary. So if there was a co-located property with 3 grows on it, it would be the exterior boundary of any licensed premises to the property on which a sensitive use is located.
right.
And I'm good with that.
That's the way I understand it. Yes.
So.
I concur.
Yeah, 'cause the
So
playgrounds.
Supervisor Toffenali, just so I'm clear, from property line, Supervisor Stopper, property line, am I correct?
Oh, we just discussed
No,
premises.
it's not premise.
Premise. Oh, you were just-
Premises to property line.
This is what we're going to clarify.
So it's measured from the cultivation area, the premises,
Premises
To the
to
property line.
defined on the site plan, to the property line of the sensitive use,
Correct.
or to a specific site, say it's a bus stop.
When I first heard it, I heard it backwards also,
Okay.
but this is.
Okay.
So you're good with property line?
No, premise, okay. Toffenali's property line, Stopper's premise,
Property line.
Mills' property line.
premise,
Premise, I'll go in with premise as well.
That's what you wanted, right, Gary?
Yeah.
Okay. So we got 4-1.
We got 4-1.
Got 4-1? Okay, there you go.
How'd that work?
Right. So then next would be the setback of the premises to the property line on the parcel that it's located. How big of a setback?
Did that work well under the UO?
Depends on your point of reference.
I would like to separate this out into 2 parts, because I think indoor cultivation has a different impact to the neighboring property as it would be to outdoor. I don't think there is an impact necessarily as much from an indoor cultivation unit, as the smell and light should not be onerous from outside the building if they're doing it correctly. So I think a indoor cultivation site should not necessarily have anywhere near the setbacks that outdoor cultivation site has. So that's, I think we should have two separate things on this.
I
Setbacks.
agree.
I agree. Supervisor Toffenelli? What do you think?
Okay,
I mean, just splitting it up, I think was the question.
yeah, that's fine.
That's fine.
All right, so Peter, let's take on the first one, outdoor.
Okay. So again, it was 75 feet during the urgency ordinance. It seemed as reasonable as could get.
We've got mixed reviews.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And, you know, the options are any number between 0 and infinity, I suppose.
So outdoor, staff is recommending 75. What's the weigh in?
I'm fine with
I got you.
I'm fine with 75 outdoor and 35 indoor.
So I think under the urgency ordinance in the industrial zones, it was whatever the structural setback was for the zone.
Okay, I'll
Which
take
is-
that.
It's going to vary the zone. It's probably industrial. It's maybe in the range of 10, 20 feet.
I guess,
Okay.
I guess the structural setback would be the building it's contained in, so it wouldn't matter. Okay,
Some residential.
Supervisor, go ahead, please.
so the set,
So you're saying 75, but in industrial zones, whatever the current code is for an industrial building.
And I guess, and then if you're indoor cultivation on an ag zone, do you want to maintain the 75-foot setback, or do you want to modify that?
No
I
different,
think-
oh, go ahead.
I think we should maintain the setback on other properties, but when it comes to manufacturing, we'll,
An industrial zone.
industrial zone, I'm sorry, yeah.
I don't support that. If whatever might be a setback if you're going to build, as Gary mentioned, you can build the barn on your property or a tulip shed or whatever it is you want, then, and it's an indoor grow, and we've already said indoor grows have a minimal impact compared to an outdoor grow. And you want to put a building up for an indoor grow on your A1 property, then I don't think it needs to be a 75-foot setback.
The typical
like-
setback for those larger agricultural zones is 30 feet.
I support 30 feet for indoor grow, for an indoor grow on
Anything.
outdoor, yeah, non-commercial.
I guess the way to put it would be for every zone that indoor growing is being allowed, it would be the setbacks that the buildings would have to be set back from the property line, would be the way I would introduce it into it, but that's just my opinion. And then we can debate outdoor.
So you're suggesting we break this down, so let's break this down. Industrial, indoor, setbacks, Supervisor Topper's saying is 30 feet or what the code currently stands at.
What the code
What
says
it
for
is
the building that it would be, reside within.
Okay, I agree with that. So Supervisor Toffenelli, you want to weigh in, or?
On that issue,
Yeah.
I'm fine with that.
Supervisor Mills?
I'm good.
It's another 5-0. Outdoor.
See, this is where we had that drug ball, again, that 75 feet in some cases wasn't enough, and it did create some conflict. So,
I wouldn't be in favor of 75 feet again. I think it created a lot of conflicts between neighbors. I would like to see it to at least increase to at least a minimum of 150 feet.
it's not something we couldn't revisit later.
I mean, we're talking 20 acres minimum on the minimum parcel sizes here in some of these.
Supervisor Callaway?
I don't want to go towards revisiting things later. This is difficult enough as it is. you know, there's a huge difference between 75 feet and 150 feet. Staff's recommending 75 for the setback on an outdoor grow on a legally approved zone, minimum 20-acre parcel. So I support the 75 feet.
Supervisor Stopper?
We're up to 20 acres.
Light,
Right.
Mike?
Sorry. We're up to 20 acres. I'm thinking pushing it back more would help mitigate some of the issues. I think there's other considerations to take in throughout here. I would be fine with 75 feet, but I think there's more to it than just 75 feet.
I've just to tell you, I'm at 150 only because of some of the difficulties that we ran into, even in the denial phase, as they were coming to us at the board. That number kept cropping up, that 75 kept cropping up.
Sorry, I'm just doing some math.
No, it's okay. Take your time.
So maybe I could weigh in. The reason why we recommended that we stick with the 75 feet, if the purpose is to allow those cultivators who were previously registered and they were at 75 feet, if we changed it to a higher number, that might preclude their ability to get a provisional license because they would have to relocate the premises from where they were at before. That's not a judgment call, that's just a
I'm okay with the
fact.
75 feet.
I'm not trying to advocate for that, I just want to let you know that that was why we selected that number, was
I
the
concur.
purpose was to allow those who were previously
got it.
registered to meet the current.
75.
Yeah, 75.
You got 3 votes?
3, Callaway, Stopper, Garman.
There is, I guess, one way we could, you know, if you were concerned about that distance, and Julie may kick me on this one, whether we have a standard for a new cultivation site that's greater than that. So if you qualify under the immediate provisions of, you know, re-permitting the existing cultivation site, but if you're relocating to a new site, or, you know, something else, then a greater setback could be an option.
Mr. Mauer, I'm not going to kick you, I'm going to buy you lunch, because that would be an answer, to push the new sites out to the 150.
Is there any interest on the part of the board revisiting, or are we still good where we're at?
I would support that.
Well, of the 3 that voted to allow the 75, does anybody want to change their vote? Seeing, stay where we are.
75 feet?
I mean, unless, we can bring it back up. You all good? Supervisor Stopper?
He's the swing vote here in this, I think.
You know, it's the, please don't call me that. The future properties is something that needs to be continued discussion. Let's stick with 75 feet for now. This still has to go through the planning commission, then it comes back to the board. If there's anything enlightening, we can make that change later.
Thank you. We're going to take a break at 3 o'clock, so let's see if we get one more question done.
So fencing.
Whoa, 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 I want to make sure. Indoor grow,
Meets
I
the
wanna-
zoning setback regardless of the zone. So if it's industrial zone, you've got a fairly small setback. If you're in ag zone, you've got whatever the ag zone is, I believe it's 30 feet for,
okay,
For
I
indoor.
just, all right, thank you.
yeah. Fencing? So under the fencing requirement, we had a solid fence that was intended to provide screening of the plants. Due to the topography, that didn't always provide screening, and in some cases, we felt that sometimes the fencing was more of an eyesore than the plants. There are no state requirements for fencing. It's totally up to the cultivator to provide their own, you know, security. I would suspect that most cultivators here or want to have fencing to keep animals out, if nothing else, maybe two-legged as well as four-legged. But the options are, we don't require any and let the cultivator decide how they want to secure their crop. We require something that's, chain link or field fencing to provide security for trespassing, or we try to screen it again with some type of solid fencing.
I'd like to hear from the sheriff on this one.
I want to weigh in real quick, and so far as, that was the one thing I really did not like about the urgency ordinance is it just blighted everything. When we tried, thought it was a good idea, but in hindsight, I think you guys nailed it. I mean, it just didn't work.
Because the black visqueen was all over the place.
It just
There's
made it
garage doors up around one near Rancho.
just blight. Sheriff, I'm sorry.
It's okay, you're the chair, you can talk all you want.
Supervisor Mills asked you.
What would you like to see?
The concern for the sheriff's office is not only for the growers having trespassers coming and stealing their crops, my concern is kids going in. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but there's a potential for kids to go in and steal marijuana. That's the biggest issue that I see. We had an issue, or back in 2015, we had a triple homicide because people came into a crop and they were able to sneak into it from the backside and steal a bunch of marijuana. It's an issue. I don't know, you're talking about a half an acre property. I understand that when you drive over, it doesn't stop the view of the marijuana. And again, my concern isn't stopping the view of seeing the marijuana. My concern is the control of keeping the marijuana inside of the fencing. One of the things that we had in the UO was that they had to have some type of secured fencing, and you're right, people were putting up the plastic and we were having people take a pocket knife and cut through the plastic, go and steal the marijuana. It's an issue. If you're going to have a commodity now that is going to be legal in the county, now we're going to be taking theft reports for marijuana being stolen. So if you don't have a way to secure it, Sender's Market has fencing around their property. You've got fencing around your property to protect your items inside of your fencing, inside of on your property. So fencing for me is golden. If you can secure the property or just the grow, that's good for us. Again, you folks have that decision to make on whether you want to implement that upon these folks. For us, anytime you have a secured area, it makes our job easier.
The reason for the question was, I don't want to make a chain link fencing company rich. If as long as the statement is that it be secured from children, if that's the ultimate goal, what type of fencing it is should be left up to the individual.
And I agree. Again, I'm not so much concerned about what type of fencing, just something that makes it secure. Honestly, if it was me, I would love to have all indoor grows because now it's all secure.
True.
But that's not an option. So if there's a way for you folks to implement some type of security to make our jobs easier and protect their property, again, that's on you folks.
I don't want to specify the type of fencing.
No.
I am more interested in ensuring that the needs
It's
are met
secure.
from the sheriff's department.
I would like to see the grow itself secured.
Yes.
Supervisor Stopper?
I just want to say I agree with what Rick's saying, and in number 23, I agree with what they've recommendation here with one clarification, or similar means metal fencing.
Means metal
When
fencing.
you say metal, you're talking about cyclone fencing.
Well, no, because metal fencing could be your basic horse fencing or other fencing,
field
so there's
fencing.
multiple metal fencings.
Yeah.
To be your cyclone fencing, I mean, metal's, somewhat either way. I can show up to a grow, whether it's cyclone or not, with a pair of bolt cutters,
Oh,
and I can get
absolutely.
through any fence I
And
want
you
to.
can climb over
It's
it,
a
too.
deterrent.
That's all
And
it is.
so let's make it metal, and, or just a clarification here, or similar means metal fencing.
As long as it's secure. If you guys are happy with it, I'll be happy with it.
Well, I think the person that wants to be happy with it is the person that's cultivating. So my recommendation, it could be a wood fence. You can have wood fences that look nice, I mean, or for whatever. It's not up
Right.
to us to say, or field fencing, as I thought I heard Jack say. And if you go down to item 26, which is security cameras, the state requires security cameras, so that's a non-starter. So whether it's a fence that keeps a deer out, or whether it is a fence that keeps a neighbor out, and of course, it's always kids, they can go in front of Bret Hart High School and buy it, why do they want to go steal it? And they have to have a fence, and I just, I think it is, the area looked terrible, the way it was before. So my recommendation, it could be metal, it could be wood, it could be a field fence. I mean, they have to have a gate, if I read the rules correctly, and they're gonna have to have cameras. So if the issue is who's stealing, whether it's the neighbor kid or somebody from Fresno, it doesn't matter. So
I just came to answer Dennis's question. Yes, I'd like to see some fencing. That's all.
Oh, my gosh.
Get this one going.
Okay.
We're ready for a
so-
break, so.
All right, I recommend metal or wood, could be field fencing. We want to limit the eyesore. It was a terrible eyesore throughout the county. And if you jump to 26 of cameras, that's the key to security.
I'm not ready to jump to
Supervisor Toffenali, thank you for your patience.
You're welcome. I'm for a fence around it. I know we had some issues. Is the composition of the fence, I just put it to staff and say, is a fence required? Will they submit with their permit, what fence they're going to do, and it's up to them to decide whether it's going to be adequate or not. If it's not adequate, they can tell him, their options on what they can do.
That's subject to
He
interpretation.
doesn't want that.
Well,
I know he doesn't want that. I can tell by the look on his face. But we can say metal, we can say wood, we can say plastic fencing, the plastic fencing, the white stuff you see going around. There's all kinds of stuff that you can say. But is it going to be adequate for security? You're the one that's going to have to be dealing with and issuing the permits.
So I think we had some language from the Planning Commission draft recommended regulatory ordinance from, a year and a half ago now that I think is going along the line you're saying. We don't really want to dictate the materials that it's being made of as long as it provides some security. And yes, anyone can get through any fence if they want to with the right tool or good climbing skills. But to the degree that it serves as a deterrent, what we don't want to do is be judging aesthetics. That just gets us into discretion that we don't want to have to deal with. So as long as, and we can craft language that ensures some level of security for, to prevent trespass. So if that's the direction you want to go, we've got some language.
That's the direction I would go.
That's the direction I would go.
Supervisor Mills?
Same here.
Supervisor Callaway?
Yes.
Yes, 5-0, and we're on a 10-minute break.
Take a break.
Jack?
There it is, okay.
Mr. Mauer?
So the next item are generators. And we're suggesting that the generators only be used in sort of an emergency purpose. And I know that sometimes you've got, I don't mean just, a clear emergency, but the fact that, your solar panels are down for some reason and you have backup power. But it's not to be the primary source of power is what I intended for that.
Do you want to begin, or Supervisor Stopper? Supervisor Stopper.
Staff's recommendation is good, state requirements. Anybody with a backup generator knows, if things go down, it's prudent to our household needs or any other business. So yeah, that, as a primary source, no. as a backup source, absolutely.
Supervisor Callaway.
I recommend we follow state regulation regarding generator requirements.
Is that what the staff's recommending?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, not really,
I'm
because
not-
it doesn't designate horsepower, and the state regs designate horsepower.
So the state would allow for that as a primary source of power if it's under, what is it, horsepower?
Under 50.
50 horsepower.
I'm for emergency only.
And then after 2023, it changes.
Supervisor Mills?
It's all right, emergency only.
Supervisor Stopper, you said emergency only? I agree, emergency only. 4-1.
So what are you going to do about those people that are living on places where there is no power? Are you going to say, too bad? I mean, there are people who live off the grid.
That's fine, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a policy call.
But,
If
I
they
mean,
did
we're
not
not,
have some other power source, they would need to develop that.
Again, we're setting up our own rules where the state already has a rule. So are we now going to, yeah, I know we can, but the more we can do that follows with the state, then there isn't redundancy, that's less for staff to do, that we follow code, state code.
next item.
That was
Next
a
one is-
4-1 vote.
It was a 4-1 vote.
Next issue is lighting. The state has standards, they need to be downward facing and shielded. One of the big issues that we face here was what someone referred to as glowworms in the sky, I think, or the big glowworms on the hillside. And I think that we need to not only rely on the state standard, but we would need to have the standards in our code, and I'm suggesting that we actually have those greenhouses, hoop houses fully covered at night so that we don't have that kind of light pollution.
We wouldn't be the first county to do that. And adding to that point is that our new general plan update, how does the dark sky ordinance there fit within what we're trying to do here?
Well, and this would be consistent with dark skies type of provision.
Supervisor Stopper. I'm sorry, were you done? Supervisor Mills?
Staff's recommendation is agreeable. If someone's doing their own cultivation, they do light depth during the year, they'd be able to drag something over if they have lights in it during the night at the same time.
Rita, we spend a lot of time on dark sky ordinances.
Yeah, I am a big proponent of a dark sky ordinance.
I'm in
But-
favor of the staff's recommendations.
As am I.
I concur. I think that, I really do want that ordinance to come out to make sure we can enforce this. That was one of my #1 complaints.
Yeah.
Was that issue. And it's easily fixable. So that's 4. Rita, where were you?
Yes.
5.
That was a hard one, wasn't it?
Peter?
So next issue is security requirements. My reading of the state law says that they are required to identify what their security requirements are, but there are no specific standards of what is required under state law. We certainly, fencing is something we talked about. We want to make sure it's locked. And so the other issue that the sheriff has brought up is requiring security cameras. So those are the options that we've identified.
Doesn't the state regulations require
They don't,
security cameras?
to my knowledge, my reading of the code, it doesn't require it. It requires the grower to tell the state what their security protocols are, what systems they have in place. And
Yeah, that's correct. It just says, provide a detailed security protocol. The word camera actually doesn't appear at all in the CDFA regulations anywhere for cultivation.
So when we talk again about security requirements, are we saying that we're going to adopt the state, what the state's saying?
No,
For
because
this?
there are no standards. They're requiring the grower to submit to the state what they are proposing as far as security. But there are no specific standards that says you must have at a minimum these things. This is something that the sheriff may want to weigh in on, but we're suggesting that we have at least a minimum of, the fencing and that it be locked. And security cameras is also something that the sheriff has recommended.
So we're going to lock a facility that somebody can climb over the fence on?
Well,
It's a
I'm-
deterrent.
I'm
it's a deterrent. Like, Mr. Stopper said, you can't prevent anyone with the big enough bolt cutters or, climbing ladder, whatever, from entering. People can break into almost anything, but at least you have minimum deterrence. That's what we can expect. If there are cameras, at least it provides some assistance to law enforcement for capturing people or ensuring that someone's not pulling a fast one and, oh yeah, my crop was stolen, when in actuality it was shipped to Nevada or someplace.
Mr. Mayor, if we say locked facilities, a facility to me is a structure, but in this case, you're saying could also be the outdoor grow,
Yes, so it would be the premises.
so it's the premise.
What we don't want is someone just to be able to walk on in. If they're going to break in, they're going to break in. There's nothing we can do to stop that. But we certainly don't want people to just be able to walk up, open a door or a gate, and just have access to it.
So you have fencing, like field fencing and a gate. What in the heck good is a gate if you have field fencing? Or you have the fencing you see around a vineyard, which is pretty much to keep the deer out. Now I have a gate, what am I locking up? I mean, I hear what you're saying. I'm trying to put as much of this on state regs, so we're not running out all the time, and we're trying to set up a security system that maybe the sheriff might like. But we're not, and now we're out trying to regulate that. The issue should be on the cultivator. They don't want their almond crop stolen, they don't want their cannabis plants stolen, and they don't want their vineyards, right? So who are we to say, except that it's a volatile product at the moment?
I'm not advocating for a position. I'm supplying, this is a discussion that
I
board members
know, I
need to have.
know, I know, I
So,
apologize,
that's all
I
right, I
do
understand.
apologize, I have a problem, I gotta let my colleagues talk, I've gotta cogitate on this.
Supervisor? Supervisor Mills, your light is on.
It's interesting. I remember Under Sheriff Macedo talking about the security issue too, but I don't think that we want to go down the road of requiring the sheriff's department to approve every security system that might come along. There's a lot of new technology out there and it could be done very easily, including motion sensor. I mean, anybody that's got a Ring doorbell understands what this is all about. So I would go with staff recommendations at this point.
Supervisor Stopper?
I think these people want to protect their product as much as Maria had brought up, that there's the fact that they do want to protect it. I think that a majority of the staff's recommendation is kind of open-ended here, because it just says what type of cameras, how. They're required to provide the state with their security plan. We already set these gates and these fence earlier on farther up, so that's already a requirement. I think when they submit, we should require them to submit their security plan to us, the same as they submit it to the state. And I think it's in their best interest to provide themselves with the best security plan that they can.
Supervisor Toffenelli?
I'm going with staff recommendations. They've gone through the whole urgency ordinance and everything, and they have the experience. They know what worked and didn't work, so I'm going to go with staff recommendations.
Supervisor Mills, your staff recommendations.
Correct.
Supervisor Callaway, where are you landing on this?
What are we protecting? Are we trying to protect their crop? I'm not trying to protect their crop. That's up to them to protect their crop. If somebody comes in and takes their plants, that's up to them to call the sheriff's office and say, somebody took my plants. I would rather we go with what the state is and let them submit what they think is in their best interest to protect their crop. The same as I pick the kind of lock I want on my front door. That's my choice. I don't see why we're out trying to tell them how to protect their crop.
Supervisor Stopper? So you're going with state regs? Am I correct?
Oh, yes. long
Supervisor
range.
Stopper?
The state regs, but I would like to include that they submit their security plan to to whoever, the planning department or the sheriff at the same time that they submit it to the state, so that the sheriff's aware when they go on the property what they have to deal with in case they do call and say, hey, I'm getting robbed, come out, They know where the bear trap is.
I just want to clarify, there are no state regs when it comes to security. The only state reg is submit a
The
security
submission.
plan.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's-
okay.
that's
Just
what
wanted
I'm
to make
saying.
sure.
I will join you two in state regs. So 3, 2, Mills and Toffenelli, no.
So it's just basically submittal of their security plan. All right. So the next issue is fire safety. The state requirement requires that all indoor cultivation, they notify the local fire district. We're suggesting just for informational purposes that they also notify for outdoor cultivation as well.
Supervisor Mills?
Well, former fire person, I would agree. Outdoor needs to be looked at. Not that there's going to be anything there, but it will also give them an opportunity to put together a fire plan. If they know the site, they're familiar with where things are located, what's stored in buildings, all of that is a key component to rapid response. So outdoor plus indoor.
So you support the staff's recommendation?
Yes.
Supervisor Toffenelli?
I support staff recommendations. I think that's something that needs to be done. I do it at my business. Like I said, I'm inspected yearly fire. We're looked at. They're aware of everything I have. They're notified. They know we exist. I don't see anything wrong with that. It gives the fire departments the opportunity to know, like Dennis pointed out. I'm required to have a site plan in location of fire hazard things in my shop and where they're located, as far as cylinders, paints, solvents, what have you. That all has to be on a map and yearly and annually when the fire department comes out to inspect. So I don't see any different than any other business.
Supervisor Stopper?
Just rereading it a couple times, I think staff's recommendation is good. It's required by the state for indoor grows. The only thing you're adding is if it's outdoor or mixed light, also be a notification of fire districts. I think that's us being part of a strong community and working together. You want the fire department to know what they're walking into if you have a fire on your property. So, and then the hazardous material thing, you already nailed it under Coupa program and everything else. Staff recommendation's good to me.
Supervisor Callaway?
Do we do this, require this for all other ag products when a winery goes in? Do we?
Well, we don't require a special permit for other ag operations. Now, obviously, if someone's building new building, the fire department has to sign off on that.
Right.
But as far as just someone cultivating grapes, no.
I mean, if it is just a notification that I'm going to have a cannabis site here, that's all I would
Yeah.
support. I mean, if I want to put in my winery, you don't, they, whatever the pronoun is, does not require anything more than that, if that at all. So when we say notification to local fire departments, when it says for all cultivation licenses, I'm not clear what that is.
So that would include not just the indoor cultivation, which is the minimum which is required by state law, but it would include outdoor and mixed light.
Okay. Okay, I'll support that.
I support that as well. So you got 5 with staff recommendation.
Excuse me.
27B.
27B has to do with the regulation of hazardous materials and pesticides. Now, the state basically occupies a field on pesticide regulation. We cannot impose any additional standards on pesticides. But we could come up with new standards regarding hazardous materials. Working with Environmental Management Agency, we feel that the current standards we have in place under the Coupa program and other regulations that are there are sufficient.
I support that.
So you support relying on existing regulations and programs.
I support that also.
Supervisor Toffenelli is yes. Supervisor Stopper?
Yes.
Supervisor Mills?
And I don't. And the reason is because there's a lot of thresholds that are out there right now, which our Environmental Health Office is relying on the state's thresholds in terms of cleanup. And it's one of the problems that we have in this county is because a single location doesn't meet the state threshold, and I'll go back to those butane cylinders at our high school here, we don't get a local cleanup response, and it puts us in a precarious position. So my answer is no. It needs new requirements.
My answer is yes for 1, Mills, no. 28.
Okay. The background check. I think this is one that probably have a lengthy discussion on. We have, state has a background check requirement. We can require a separate process locally. And then I think we need to make sure that if we do establish a local process, it's a very clear ministerial type process with an ability to, an appeal process that does not go through my office, that's handled by the Sheriff's Department and whatever kind of appeal process they would have to with maybe a hearing officer.
Can we ask the sheriff to come up?
I think the sheriff would be very appropriate at this moment.
How you doing?
I'm doing okay. How you doing?
I've been doing good. I had lunch. Happy. The sheriff's office got a hold of the federal DOJ, Department of Justice, and as you remember, we talked about this quite a bit extensively, that there is what we call a III background check, which allows us, being the sheriff's office, to check anybody that is going to be into this program on a federal level. The way it stands right now is we can only check them state level, which would be basically for an employment. So the problem we were having was that we could have somebody from out of state who was a convicted felon that was able to come to Calaveras County and have a marijuana grow or any business in that matter, and we would not know that. The resolution that you folks passed last week and the work that I did with the Federal Bureau of Investigation and DOJ they're going to allow us to do those background checks. I've talked to numerous growers, and they're all on board. They say, hey, we don't have a problem with you doing background checks because they want to have a legitimate business. I know Ms. Callaway and I have had some long-term discussions on why we should be doing a background check when the state is already doing it. And I tried to explain it to you before, that the state does not share their information with us. Her argument was that if the state is saying that this person can have a marijuana dispensary or be an owner of a marijuana business, that we shouldn't have to do that background. The problem is that they have to come to us to get their license to the county first before they can go to the state. Is that not correct? Okay, so now we should be able to do the background first so that we know that this person that we're sending to the state is okay to have a marijuana license.
Supervisor Toffenali.
I support the sheriff. We've had conversations on this before, not even now, but back. We're having other discussions. And he's been very consistent, him and the undersheriff both, on these background checks and the necessity for them. So I fully support it.
Supervisor Stopper.
I have talked to Rick extensively, and I do agree with this. There is one thing I do want to bring up, though. During the urgency ordinance, it may have been just because of the sheer numbers, there was a backlog on some of these background checks. Someone would be only hurting themselves if they were to enter the process and not have a good background and then fail. So I would agree with this recommendation, but yet during the process of the background check, the owner has, most of these owners have already passed them to some degree. Whether they've done something bad in the last few years is another thing that is yet to be foreseen, but as having passed one in the past, may proceed pending approval from the background check is the only thing that, because I don't want the process to be backed up on 150, 100, who knows how many people end up filing. But I wouldn't want the process to be backed up on one issue. So as you're processing, they may be able to proceed with providing their information to the planning, and then if so on to the state, if you're still going through the process of doing these, and then they're only hurting themselves if something comes back and they fail later.
Absolutely. Because I can get that information now, and I'm still waiting to hear back from them because Marita and I had talked about this also. I need to, if we have somebody, Billy Bob here, that has already got his license, he's gone through the process through the UO, and we did his background. The problem is the backgrounds that we did, again, were only at state level. So they have to be resubmitted in order to do them at the federal level. Because it's a different process through the feds now.
And people have issues in other states that they may not have.
They may not have had here.
Came to light before.
Right.
I concur, and I do want to I do agree with your recommendation, sir. I just would like something instated in there in the process of you processing these triple Is. They may proceed pending approval.
I don't have a problem with that, because what's going to happen is if they fail that background check, then they've wasted everybody else's time along with their time and money.
Their money.
Absolutely. I don't have a problem with them moving forward in the process. And we will expedite as quickly as we can. We're getting staffed up now for this process. That was one of the reasons why we brought this resolution to you folks now, so that step is already in place, so we can start moving forward with it now. Once you guys come up with some type of an ordinance, whenever you start that, we can actually start doing backgrounds on people prior to them getting their county license, whenever you guys decide to do that, if we have their permission to do that, and the board has approved that. we'll get that moving forward as quickly as possible. You got to remember, we don't control how quickly we get those backgrounds back.
Yeah.
That comes
That's-
from the feds and the state. So we submit it, it's all done, as they all know, it's all done electronically. Put your fingerprint on the pad and off it goes. That's it. So it takes time for the state and the feds to get it back to us.
It only takes one to make that prolonged, so that's, I agree with you.
Yeah.
I just would like it stated, they may proceed.
And I don't, again, don't have a problem with them moving forward with the process while their their backgrounds are being checked. That's not a problem.
Supervisor Mills?
No, I support it as long as we don't go back to the UO of who's going to be the gatekeeper over the decision of whether or not someone's background check is determinant, whether or not they get a,
Well, I think that's what Peter just talked about, that it's going to fall back upon the sheriff's office
that is my point.
and we don't have a problem with that.
Okay. I support.
I only have one question, Sheriff. I support your position on this. I'm just thinking pragmatically. You know, when you have, you know, there's your regular workers that you'd have on a farm, and then there's going to be harvest where you've got a bunch of bodies coming in for a relatively short period of time. My prediction is that eventually there's going to be, UFCW is going to have certified cannabis workers who got the little badge. I'm guessing that at some point, just like in other agricultural industries, you end up with labor contractors who put those packages together and make sure they've got their labor organized. I mean, I'm going to back you on this, but how are we going to handle that situation in year one? It'll eventually, markets will make it more efficient over
Right,
time.
right.
I believe that. But initially, there's going to be some starts and stops.
Well, again, you have an employer who's going to be hiring somebody, just like when we hire a deputy, we have to do a background check on them. If the employers want to start that process and get him in here or her in to get the background check started, we can start that process so that they know that they're hiring somebody that they can actually hire.
I guess I'm thinking, you know, when you've got, you need a lot of people, so you're going to have people come in from out of the county. A labor contractor who's got a crew put together in Stanislaus County, and they're all certified and have their background checked there. Could they come up here?
Absolutely. If they've
But
already,
would that pass muster with the
Yes.
SO?
yes.
Okay, and, you know, same thing, I mean, UFCW's got a hiring hall here, and they've got that, but people are coming from other counties. Is that universal badge from Nevada County or Stanislaus County?
As long as they've been checked, I don't have a problem in recognizing it. It's just like I recognize somebody else's CCW.
Okay,
So I don't have a problem with that.
thank you. That's just my questions. So,
Wait a minute.
I know I was putting on to you, sorry, Supervisor Callaway, I'm sorry.
Yes. Better pick a
Okay.
good one.
All right. Couple of things. I do disagree with the sheriff. I think we have people that have already gone through the process. We've already said that there had to be going back to the very beginning, prior registration and good standing and a temporary state license. And now we're going through that process again. They have to they have to be permitted by the state, and if the state says no, it doesn't matter what we say, it's a no. So we're doing it, and I understand the sheriff saying, well, we're sending you state somebody good, but the state might find something that the sheriff might or might not. And so it's a moot point. So I think it's somewhat redundant for at least the first tier people. I mean, if you have somebody who's transferred their license and we have a new person, again, that then starts the process. If I understood what, I just want to make clear what Jack said, if some worker bees come in from another county and they've already been vetted, then that will be accepted by our sheriff's office, correct?
In that aspect, yes. However, we have, and I don't know if they're going to get to that or not, but the sheriff's office is looking to have ID badges, just like what we're doing. they're still going to have to apply for that ID badge so that, again, when my deputies show up on site, we know who we're dealing with.
But if they got a badge in Stanislaus County, then they have to get another badge in
Yes, ma'am, that's for
Calaveras?
Stanislaus County.
Well, then, what Jack said doesn't apply.
No, the background part's a different story. If they've been background there and I can call down to Stanislaus, if they can tell me that they're clear, I'll sign off on them by Stanislaus saying that they've been cleared through their background process. I don't know if Stanislaus has that system up and running. I know Monterey County does. I know Placerville City does. I know there are a few entities out there that do have it done. So if they come from that, they've already had that background because the DOJ has already approved those certain municipalities and counties to do that triple-I background.
So maybe one of the, I'm sorry. I was going to say, so one of the things that might happen is, during harvest season, when we know there'll be a bump in labor needs, people could bring in their cards from Monterey County or wherever they come from, or whatever the labor contract.
If they have that.
And bring them to you and say, I want to work in your county.
Absolutely. I don't have a problem with that. I want to try and make it as seamless as we can, but we still need to know who we're dealing with when we get to the site. Now, if Monterey County happens to have an ID badge that just says Monterey County on it, and I'm not opposed to looking at that to see if it matches what we're doing and honor it. Again, I don't want to double do the horse. I want to make it so that when my guys show up, that they're safe on that site and they know who they're dealing with. That's the key for us.
So I now need to hire employees. I can hire them, and we're just talking cultivation, but it would be
Right.
the same dispensaries. We hire them, and I can hire them. I can put them to work today pending approval of their background check.
They've still got to get their ID card through us, and that's all done basically at the same time when we send off their background checks. Yes, they can,
I
in answer to
understand,
your
but can
question.
I hire that person today and then have them go through the SO's process?
Yes.
Okay. I'd like that, no. What I'm saying is I can hire today, I can put somebody on today, I take the risk today while the SO's office is doing
Right.
their background and gives them their
Right,
security
but you
card. or
got to remember, they got to come to our office, they're going to do that process, the fingerprints are going to be sent off, they're going to be issued an ID card.
Got it.
They're good to go.
But I'm still working them,
Yes, ma'am.
okay? Can somebody do their live scan in other locations besides Calaveras? Somebody comes in from Amador and they
No.
want to do it in
They
Jackson.
won't allow that.
But they do it for an ABC license. When I got my ABC license,
Right, we send that to the ABC. The problem is you're not going to find, it's a government entity. You're not going to be able to go to Amador County and say, hey, I want to grow marijuana in Calaveras County and do your background check there and then have it sent to us.
but I don't mean the background check, I meant, I'm just
The
going to do
fingerprint.
the mechanics of doing a live scan. I mean, I can do it for a CCW. I could get it done in another county, can I, or in Stockton, even though you are issuing my CCW for Calaveras.
Correct. They'll send it to us, but I still got to go back to, they have to come to my office to fill out their background packet to get their ID card. So why would they not just do it all right then and there?
I don't know why.
It doesn't make
Right.
sense.
I just want
How
to,
many people here by show of hands want to run to Amador County and get your fingerprints and then come back to my office and do your paperwork?
one, I got one.
One, okay, well,
I meant, I'm,
including you.
well, that's true.
I just wanted to clarify, I do, the sheriff is correct, I do have some,
Say that again, the sheriff?
is correct in that he and I have a disagreement on how we perceive this, but, I've lost the votes on that, so I can, but the other question is that when we put the
It's good to have those
application package together, if in that application practice, package. It could be the requirements that the SO's office wants to. Is that possible?
Certainly, we can have that as a part of the overall application packet for someone who applies for that. I just want to make sure that I understand exactly what's going on and just, a couple other fine points. So the sheriff will have its own background check process. It will apply to anyone and owners, operators, and employees of the site will need to have a background check. We've discussed having some type of ID card. I don't think that's necessarily a part of this ordinance. It'd probably be a separate ordinance we would take to establish this ID card process. It would be sort of transferable from one location to another. But we can talk about that. The one thing I really want to point out, though, is that, as a ministerial type of permit, we need to have very clear standards. So we'll need to work with the sheriff to establish what is a disqualifying conviction, that you check the box, you're convicted for this, you're disqualified. The use of discretion, I understand, not everything's black and white, there's a lot of gray. But we have to have it as clear and concise as possible, otherwise, we're subject to some challenge as far as legitimacy of the ordinance and our ability to disqualify. We had a lot of concerns about this during the urgency ordinance where people appealed their disqualification and the planning commission then was sort of left to be sort of the judge of, gee, was that really a disqualifying qualification? So we need to be very clear. I don't think we need to iron that out right now, but before we write the ordinance, we need to have that so we can bring that back and we may want to discuss that now. What are disqualifying
So, Mr. Maurer,
convictions?
does the state say what certain disqualifications are? I mean, I have a liquor license, I have a restaurant. The sheriff isn't doing to me what he's doing to the cannabis growers, and I'm still,
Alcohol's still not a federal
So are there rules
offense.
in the state that say you cannot have somebody in your business who has, and fill in the blank?
Well, that's what I think we need is very clear standards of these are disqualifying, and if it's the same disqualifications that the state has that the sheriff wants to use, wants to make sure that there is, our own local background, that's fine, but we just need to make sure that it's clear and concise.
When you get there, you'll be bringing that before us, correct?
Well, it's not real clear. Julie, can you read what it says, what the state says?
Well, this is it would take forever to go through the whole thing. There's a slight complication in that there's an incoming law, January 1st, 2020, which is also going to make some changes. But the urgency ordinance language came in part from what was then state law, and I think that the state developed something that was intended to be ministerial, but knowing that there's a fuzzy line. It had language that if you have a conviction, it always has to be a conviction, not an arrest, that is substantially related to the qualifications, functions, or duties of the business for which licensure is sought. That was the standard. And then they had some types of convictions that were automatically considered substantially related, such as any violent felony conviction per PC 667.5, any serious violent felony conviction. There's lists of actual convictions that go on forever in the penal code. And so what I think we're going to need to have in place, either the board would probably need to direct the sheriff and staff to work out some legally defensible set of standards that are alternative to what the state has or in addition to what the state has, or will have to sound somewhat similar in terms of the type of language used to make it adequately ministerial. Otherwise, we're looking at more of a conditional use permit type of process with the sheriff making recommendations to the planning commission. So there's a trade-off in terms of how much discretion we use. And so I don't know if the board wants to split it so that the conditional use permit applicants have a separate individualized recommendation from the sheriff. The board could do that, or the board could have a ministerial background check process that's a separate animal, which we had talked about with the sheriff. of having people apply, even possibly prior to this ordinance being finalized, if we were to get a small ordinance for background checks before the board that included the card, the ID badge, and we had standards in there, and we had an appeal process in there, that could be started before we even finalize the permanent cannabis ordinance. So these are all options that the board has, but it's important to understand the importance of needing to have criteria that are both defensible from a constitutional perspective and also that satisfy any ministerial permit process that you're intending to set up.
Are you confused now?
No, totally not. Okay, I mean, I've lost the vote on his and mine, but there is one more part, a separate appeals process. Can we not use the same appeals process that we're using? Is there some reason we would need a separate appeals process?
We could use, the board could choose to, as long as we provide some sort of process for denying an application for any reason, including the background check.
Okay,
Whether we do it as a separate appeal through the sheriff's office, through 8.06, cannabis regs would be up to the board, whatever they think would be most efficient. But to satisfy basic constitutional norms, we need to have, if background check's the basis for denial of a permit, that has to be one of the things that they can appeal if they disagree with the results.
okay, I was just trying not to have separate, if we could have a process for appeal and not one here and one here. Okay, that's fine, you can move on, Mr. Chair. Oh, I'm sorry, my colleagues want to say something.
Supervisor Mills.
No, we already had 3 votes to agree with
No, we had
staff.
3 votes. We've
We
talked this
already
one
had
to
the
death.
votes.
I'm with you,
About
3.
40 minutes ago, we had,
What is the direction for staff?
My direction or their
No,
direction?
the majority's direction. Supervisor Stopper, can you
Shaver.
sum it up?
I believe, and tell me if you disagree, that they may the sheriff's recommendation along with your recommendation is good, as long as the process of the background, during the process of the background check, the owner or the employees may proceed with either the work or the application pending approval.
So the board wants a separate ordinance that will deal with the background check and ID badge. And how would the board, is there a time limit, or when does the board want the sheriff to get back to you with this ordinance and including the standards that have been vetted through?
I personally would assume that it would be in line with this current regulation ordinance, so they should be directly in line. So, I mean, his is not going to be as in-depth as this, so he has much longer to do less.
Okay.
okay, I want to be clear on what he's saying here, that we're going to continue processing the permit while the background check is going on. We're not going to issue a permit to start growing.
Yes, that's what I intended to say. If I said something different, I apologize.
Okay, all right, I just wanted to be clear that we're going to continue the processing of the permit
Okay.
during the background
Supervisor
check.
Toffenelli, Supervisor Stopper, Supervisor Mills, you all agree with that? Supervisor Callaway?
Come on, Marita.
Yes?
All right, thank you.
And I'm yes, 5-0.
Say it louder.
She already said she agreed with the
Wasted-
sheriff, don't push it.
Wasted 40 minutes of
I
my
agree
life.
that he disagreed.
You're gonna make me miss Taco Tuesday if you keep it up.
I don't think, you could have my tickets.
I already have some.
So we may have already talked about this, the code enforcement appeals process, whether it goes to a hearing officer or the planning commission. I believe that there's hearing officer for the ministerial type permits and planning commission for conditional use permits. Any further discussion on that?
You want to state that again?
No.
So the ministerial type permits would go through the hearing officer process if there's a need for an appeal. If the conditional use permit were to be denied by the commission or approved, they have the right to appeal to the board.
Okay. Planning commission first and then ultimately the board.
Yes, sir.
I'm in
Everybody-
favor of that, yes.
Supervisor Callaway,
Are we on number 29?
we are.
She asked me a question, and I guess this is going to take a while.
No, I
wait,
mean, I
hey,
like things short.
Can we let Dennis say yes before you?
Yes.
Okay, and then we have a quorum, Marita?
My question to Dennis was, if you wanted to appeal the hearing officer, can you appeal to the board? And he said no.
That's up to you guys. You could have that procedure occur. The way we do cannabis enforcement, the hearing officer makes the final administrative order, and that has to be appealed to Superior Court. You could change the ordinance for the purposes of cannabis applications and have it go to you. Don't go there. But that's if, I mean, many of these board members were sitting for many cannabis appeals, and they know what it's like, so.
Please don't do that to us again, okay? The Superior Court is a good track for it.
What is your, we don't want to make sure you get your questions answered.
I think anything regarding this county is appealable to the Board of Supervisors. So, I mean, then was then, and I understand how hard it was on everybody at that time. But now's now, and we're already saying we're dealing with a smaller group that going, have prior registration and good standing and a temporary license, and if they don't like what a hearing officer said, no different than anything else in code enforcement, they can appeal to the board. And that's, and it's more costly for the county and the public to go to court, so.
I've got, go ahead, Supervisor Tupper.
Either way is good with me, as long as they're afforded due process by another appeal. Either way is good with me, but we do have 3 already on the original route, unless someone else
Got
wants to
3.
change their
Anybody
mind.
else want to pipe in?
We would have to change 806 ordinance and go through that.
Yeah,
So we've already gone down
right.
that road. The ones that have been here, we know what's,
Yeah.
so.
Okay, so there's 4 yeses. Supervisor Callaway, you are a,
Well, as it's presented, yeah, I'm fine on that. It's what happens after the hearing. What happens after the hearing officer, I'm not fine with.
So yes or no?
she said yes.
Yes, okay, 5-0.
Sure, Greg? Okay,
That's 5-0.
okay. Number 30, Peter?
Okay, so site remediation. This was something that was included in the ban ordinance. We also, I think, had provisions in that in the planning commission's draft ordinance. Just want to make sure that if a site is abandoned, that it is cleaned up. Doesn't mean, fully, return to its state prior to cultivation, but there's not debris left over, chemicals and that kind of thing. The time frame that we had in the ban ordinance seemed a bit excessive if we want to get things cleaned up, so we're suggesting that we keep those same standards, but we shorten the time frame, and I don't really have a specific time frame right now. I think that's something we can work out as we develop the ordinance, but it would be certainly shorter than the year or 2 that we have currently.
I would agree with that.
Supervisor Tupper?
Yes.
Supervisor Mills?
I would agree with a caveat that there are many of the sites from the ban ordinance that have still not been remediated. So my concern is whether or not code enforcement would really have the capacity to work in a shorter time window that they already have. So I'd have to see a little better work done in that area. I would approve, but the understanding that
Supervisor Callaway?
Since I'm not allowed any buts, you're not allowed any buts. So yes or no?
It's getting late.
Yes?
That's fine.
Yes, 5-0.
Take that.
31. We're almost there, guys. Hang in there.
Okay, then bonding. The state requires a $5,000 surety for the destruction of plants if they're found to be not operating in compliance with state licensure. The question is whether or not we want to have some sort of surety for compliance with our regulations.
I would be in favor of the staff recommendation of the $5,000 surety bond. For a $5,000 bond yearly, that's not very much you have to pay for that bond. Very little.
Supervisor Stopper.
I'm in agreement with, along with the state bonding, on top of the state bonding, yes, absolutely.
Supervisor Mills.
I agree with the surety bond, but I don't know if that's enough.
Supervisor
For
Callaway.
what, Mr. Mauer? What would the purpose of the bond be?
This would actually go back towards the remediation to ensure that at least there's some funds if we end up having to do some cleanup ourselves. It's hard to say what the amount, it could vary dramatically from site to site depending on what's out there.
Fine, yes.
Yes, it's 5-0. Congratulations. We made it to our list. Are there further comments before we open up to public comments so we can have some rebuttal on what we just did? Oh, you need a break?
No.
Wait, we have item number 32. I spoke to Mr. Mauer during the break,
All right.
and his presentation was fantastic. The staff did a wonderful job putting it together. Covered all the bases except for one that I pointed out. Nowhere in here, giving all the items that we went through for this ordinance, does it have a maximum growth site or growth?
We did address that during the last meeting.
We didn't address it here, though. It's not here. Is it 22,000 square feet? Is it 1 acre, 5 acres per 100 acres? What is it that we are going to agree on?
Excuse me, Director Mauer, how do you want to take this one on?
As I recall, and Supervisor Toffenel is right, it was not included in the list. I think that we discussed that at the last meeting, and I think we agreed that it was to remain at the 22,000 square feet. But we have to go back and look at my notes to make sure.
State regs is
State regs, is that what it was?
had been discussed, so it was 1 acre what we had discussed, but we're at a new meeting now, so.
Microphone.
So Jill was looking at the notes, and I think that we agreed on a type 3 license, which is a medium mixed light or medium outdoor, which was,
So the license types are divided into specialty, outdoor, or there's specialty licenses, all of which is outdoor, indoor, mixed light, specialty cottage, small, medium. And the large licenses are not going to be allowed by the state for a while. So the medium for outdoor goes up to 1 acre, 10,000 feet to 1 acre. The medium indoor goes from 10,001 to 22,000 square feet. Medium mixed light goes from 10,001 to 22,000 square feet. So the state law default goes up to 1 acre for a medium license.
And we should have had this discussion when we had minimum lot sizes then, because I think a lot of the discussion we were having may have been based on 22,000 square feet or half an acre on those lot sizes.
It's true.
Supervisor Stopper, where are you at?
I think that the reason we had pushed up to 20 acres was because I was under the impression that we were discussing 1 acre gross. And that's the reason I pushed up to 40 acres before we could start doing co-location.
Supervisor Mills?
Well, I agree with Mr. Delfinelli. It's
Okay, so you're 22,
22.
Ben, you're up to 44.
Well, just under 44, it's 43,000 and some odd.
Up to 1 acre. Supervisor Callaway?
State regs,
I'll go with this up to medium, so that's up to 1 acre too, as well. So I will join you and Ben on this, so we're up to 1 acre. All right, is there 33?
Well, Chair, I trust that staff is doing a good job of keeping track of the costs to date, so that we don't run into what we did with the urgency ordinance, that nobody knows how much it really cost us to do it. So let's not get ourselves in a situation where we're going to forensically try to reconstruct our costs, because they can, under proposition, be allocated correctly if we know what they really were to put this together. It should be part of the inclusion of the costs of the program.
Mr. Mauer, is there any other questions that we need to answer as a board before we open this up to public comment for rebuttal on our acts?
I don't have anything else at this time.
I would like to
Maybe
commend
as-
you on really putting together a very logical sequence here.
Thank you.
Thank you. There's a lot of work. We all got to be in. We're not done yet. What we'll do is we'll take a quick break. We'll come back, we'll do public comment, and then we will discuss it again to see.
How quick is quick?
Everybody has 10 minutes, so 4:25. And here. Welcome back. We're going to go to public comment right now, but we were just talking about the fire safety issue as we went through this. And I'd like to ask, and I know that the fire departments or the chiefs want to have something to say about this, so Madam Clerk, we won't hold them to 3 minutes. Who wants to come and talk for the chiefs? I'm letting the uniform have priority, yes.
Over Bill McManus?
Indeed. He's got his own uniform. Chief?
I know it's a long day, and when you hit the fire safety part, I was trying to make eye contact, raise my hand. I did
Sorry
not
about
want to walk up because I got in trouble in one meeting before doing that. I think only the sheriff's allowed to do that. Yeah. So I was disappointed.
My
that-
apologies, Chief.
No worries. So I'll be honest, I was not under the impression that we're going to be doing indoor grows. Again, for me, I don't care what we do, but as the fire chief, I have the right to make sure that our buildings and our community are safe. So when I looked up on there and it said that we'll be notified, I want to be clear, what does that mean to me? Is that a phone call? Is that a letter? Because when it's going to go in a building, 10,000 square foot, it's a big enough issue that the National Fire Protection Association across the United States has put language in there to protect us, because there's a lot of things going on. And I'm very happy that these are going to be registered growers, and I'm going to work with them in my community. But I got to take care of my people. And when I go out at 2 o'clock in the morning and a 10,000 square foot building is on fire, that's a huge concern for me. It's a concern for fire flow, it's a concern for wildland-urban interface, and it's a concern for electrical and problems that are going to kill firefighters. That's a concern of ours, because for us, it's an unknown right now. And anybody who wants to tackle me on it, you can tackle me on it. I'm going to tough one on this one. Because at the end of the day, my job is to make sure my guys and girls go home safe. So with that said, I'm sure your question is, how does that relate to other buildings in the community? Well, my community is building more than any other community in Calaveras County. And I work very well with the planning department and the building department. And when there's two things that happen, new construction and there's tenement improvement. If any of those two things happen, I get the full documentation from the building department and plan checks, and I have an opportunity to vet that, look through it, get a chance to look at the fire flow, get a chance to look at the electrical, get a chance to look at exiting, all the things that I make everybody else do. An example is Da Vinci's right now. They went into Napa Auto. Now they're a delicatessen. He had to jump through a lot of hoops. Kids Zone, it's going into a strip mall. She had to jump through a lot of hoops to make sure through the health and safety code and the fire code that everything is done correct. Because if we don't, unfortunately in my job, when it goes bad, guess who they come after? They're coming after the fire chief, and you saw that in Oakland with the Ghost Ship fire. You can't do what you're doing and just turn your head. And I'm not going to let that happen with us. So all I'm asking, and when it comes back to fire safety, we want, if it's going to be If a cannabis grower is going to go unregulated and they're going to alter the building so they can make sure that it takes care of their electrical, whatever they're doing for their lighting, whatever, that we're noticed. We have a process like we do right now with our grocery outlet, all the other buildings going in, nothing changes. There's no preferential either way. It's a system that works very well. We're very connected with Randy, with plan checks, and the fire chief in the local district has the opportunity to look at it, throw it in a trash can, or look at it and do the right thing, and go out and take a look. And that's my thing, taking a look at it and making sure that they continue their business so they don't have a fire and lose it, and it gets out into the wildland urban interface, and we have a bigger problem.
So, I'd just like to basically kind of say the same thing, is we want to have a meaningful notification that we have enough information that, you know, we can look at these, and I think it actually applies both to indoor and outdoor. I agree that there's perhaps more issues with the indoor grows, but even the outdoor grows, this is not just like any other agricultural industry. Perhaps someday in the future it will be, but right now it isn't. And we need to make sure that we're getting enough information that we can evaluate it as fire districts, and maybe we don't need to do anything else. Maybe the process that you guys are developing will address every issue that we could foresee, but we want to make sure that we have an opportunity to do that so that we can address any specific fire safety issues.
And again, last but not least, in the fire business part, our job is to keep the business going, to keep them in service, so they don't have a problem down the road. Any questions?
So, you know, so I don't think anybody was I certainly didn't imagine someone could put up a 10,000 square foot without having fire chief sign off. Like that was, did anybody else think that that was possible on a building, 10,000 square foot building? You're going to have to walk through. I mean, whether it's a beauty salon or a cannabis farm.
But when he's talking about it, even if it's a 2,000 square foot building, I think that the proper process should be followed as per the building and code requirements that actually include the fire marshal, or in this case, the chiefs in Calaveras County at this time. And I think we should define that as such. So I thank you for bringing this to light. There should be some clarity to the process, and just, you know, notification. I can understand their concern. That could be a very broad statement, and notification goes to the point where we would hold those to the same standard as we would any other
New business.
New business, or even a building that was a business before that needs to go through a structural retrofit or electrical retrofit when it goes into building or code.
That's exactly right. And that's the example of Napa Auto Parts that changed over to Da Vinci's. And if you
Right.
talk to Mr. Trotter, he had to go through a lot of things to get that building.
I think everything there's in place, sir. We just need to provide that clarity as we move forward with the ordinance, and I believe we have a consensus here to support you on that.
Is there anybody who thinks it should be under a different set of codes and directions?
I am wondering why we're even talking about this on indoor growth. The process should be the same, whether it's Napa Auto Parts, the deli, or
Yes.
the beauty shop. So I don't think we should have to, the process isn't going to change. So we're just going, I don't know why we would need to explain that in an ordinance, because we're not asking the building department or planning to do a carve-out.
And I understand that. I just wanted I've been here all day, and I wanted an opportunity to speak on behalf of the fire districts. And I did not know we were going to indoor grows. Again, my job is, you call 911, we come every time. We don't judge. But when I saw that up there, I just wanted an opportunity to go, we're okay, right? I'm going to get the notification, I'm going to get my stuff. Because I didn't want it to be, we both talked, I didn't want it to be, I get a phone call that cannabis went into service, they didn't make any changes on the building, and they're at walk and don't walk.
Yeah, Chief, I don't think there's anybody up here who's seen that.
There are some items on, when we notify you, when the cannabis grower notifies you about outdoor grow as well, according to state rules. And Julie, you've got a little research on that. You want to talk about that? Just so you know, we've got the building, but you need to know what's coming on the outside stuff too.
The board could require the, and I think that, I think we probably would have just done this as a matter of course, even as just sort of a procedural thing, that the growers would submit a copy to us of what they've submitted to the state, including a diagram. They have to submit, per regulation, CDFA Regulation 8105, a diagram to scale that includes the boundaries of the premises where any cultivation activity is taking place, all perimeter dimensions, all entrances and exits to the premises, all entrances and exits to the property. If premises is less than the property boundary, they have to show where the premises is in relation to the property line, what the rest of the property is used for. So we can require that the cultivation permit applicants to submit that same diagram to us locally and then provide it to the fire departments, if that would be helpful.
That would be great, because again, we're dealing with two things. We're dealing, which is going to be positive, the regulated grows, but at 2 o'clock in the morning, I got the other grows too. So sure nice for me to know I got all the information, all the combat intelligence I need, because when I'm going out the door at 2 o'clock in the morning in the middle of July, I'm thinking of edge fire. And I don't know there might be a grow. I'm pretty good on my grows, but it's just good combat intelligence, and it gives me situational awareness that I know exactly what's going on in my 165 square miles in my district. Yeah, it's a lot to
Does
cover.
anybody have any objection to sharing? I mean, they're turning into the state anyway, as part of notification to share those plans?
I don't have any objection to that. I think they should reciprocate to us. I mean, if they can, anything provided's easy. They just do 2 copies.
Supervisor Mills?
The more we can share with the fire districts, the more information you have available, the less likely you're going to come into a confined spaces problem in an open area. And that, to me, is the greatest fear of the fire districts, is suddenly your whole tactic will change, and the amount of manpower and what you're going to need to make it work will change. And it's sometimes you didn't even know that was there. It's that sudden surprise that you didn't have in your pre-fire plan that can create the destruction and the damage to, or the injuries to personnel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Supervisor Callaway, any objection to this? I think, I think we're good. I think staff has
Thank you.
direction.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for your patience all
Thanks.
day.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Now we will move on to public comment. I would ask, first I want to compliment everybody. Everybody's been really great today and being respectful of each other. It reflects very well on both you and the county. Thank you very much. Let's keep it up. People are getting tired, but let's keep it up and let's be respectful. And I think you guys know where I stand on sniping. So, Bill, lead it off. And as always, 5 in a row back there, please. We got plenty of fire chiefs here. And I don't want to get in trouble with fire marshal. They set the rules.
My name is Bill McManus from the band committee. What I want to do is just kind of tie this thing up. It's happening pretty fast. It's pretty apparent that this board has now changed positions and wants to throw this county back into the grinder again like we were a couple years ago. Everything I can see about what's been said today is just the urgency ordinance on steroids. There's really nothing different. What I would say that this is such an important topic that I am extremely disappointed in my supervisor for not being more prepared to address some of the topics. When you talk about why can't people have different licenses and all that, read Prop 64. It's called vertical integration. When you talk about can we have one plant in the backyard, read Prop 64. No, it has to be indoors. There's no outdoor growing with Prop 64. You continuously make comparisons of, well, with cannabis and vineyards, cannabis and my liquor license, cannabis and every single one of those comparisons, on one side, all of the activities were legal. Cannabis is still federally banned. Why you want to do this in the face of an EIR from a year and a half ago that resulted in the alternative, the preferred alternative being a ban, is absolutely beyond me. There shouldn't ever be any commercial cultivation in a residential area. I don't care if it's RRR, RA, R10, R6, I don't care what it is. It doesn't belong in neighborhoods. The document that I passed out to you is my last futile attempt to present another idea, which is indoor growing only. And 90% of what you did today would be out the window, would be totally unnecessary with indoor growing. So much easier to control. And no matter what happens, no matter how bad the ordinances that you come out with, no matter how badly you want to screw this county up and serve someone else other than the residents of this county, when you get this regulation, I dare you, I double dog dare you, to put it on the ballot. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Bill. Please.
I know, you're
No
throwing me
laughing,
off. That's
all right?
okay, that's
No,
okay.
respect.
I'll finish, I can finish,
Thank you, Bill. Sorry.
even with interruptions. I double dog dare you to put it on the ballot alongside of the ban and let the people of this county decide this issue once and for all. I'm sick and tired, and the people of this county are sick and tired of every 2 years going back and forth, flip-flopping on this thing, depending on who got elected, who put who in office, and everything else. This has got to stop. It is tearing this county apart. Every time we change directions, the fabric of this county is being ripped apart, and I'm tired of seeing it. Put it on the ballot, let the people decide. This issue, like the boards before you said, never did it. This issue is too big for 5 people to decide. And if you think that you represent the people of this county and you're going to allow this.
Thank you very much, Bill.
Well, and I was just trying to make up for my interruption.
We
But hey,
just saved you time.
don't worry about it, Jack.
Thank you. Trent?
I'll try to keep this short because I know you've done a tremendous amount of work, and I may not agree with you on everything, but I appreciate the work that you put in. But this gets confusing because just a couple weeks ago, we just spent just a few hours on saying that we shouldn't have a certain type of cannabis because it would attract crime and illegal grows, that it would affect other agricultural businesses, that it would have an impact on our water use and our environment, and it was a public nuisance because of odors. So we put a moratorium and said you can't grow that. And here we are spending, 6 hours now talking about bringing back a cannabis that has all the same problems plus more. It doesn't make sense to me. The best thing to do is keep the ban in effect. It's really not a ban, it's strict regulation. People can still grow their own private stash and what they need. But how can you 1 week say that one type of cannabis, because it doesn't have THC, it doesn't get you high, we can't have that. But the one that gets you high, the one that's going to impact our children and have a negative impact on them, and more research keeps coming out on the effect it has on them, but we want that one. And then I appalled that one of our supervisors kind of flippantly says, well, we don't need fences to keep kids out because they can just buy it in front of the school. That's ridiculous. We should be focused on protecting our children. They're our next generation. They get their hands on this stuff, this high THC stuff that's being produced, it has a negative impact on them. They have proven that it affects their brain development, it affects their IQ development, it increases schizophrenia in people that are prone to that, it causes psychotic episodes in people that, because they don't know the amount they're getting. It's just, I guess I'm shocked at some of the conversation. And then we don't want to listen to the people that provide safety in our county, our sheriff's department. He's saying, I need background checks. Well, we don't need to do them on the local level. I want to tell you something about businesses. There are businesses where you have to have multiple background checks to do your job. I was on it and worked for a company for doing material testing where I had to be background checked. I had 3 different background checks from 3 different school districts. I had to go get fingerprinted 3 different times because they can't share information. I had to go get a federal background check to go do testing on Beale Air Force Base. I had 4 different background checks. As a pastor, I had to have a background check to work with kids, and I had all my workers background check to work with kids. That's just part of doing business. I'm just appalled that we think we need to throw stuff like that out the window. But I want to thank you, for the hard work you did, and continue with the hard work, but consider going back to the ban. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sir?
Hello, staff, board. A little nervous here. My name is Ricardo Morales, and I have property up at McCullamy Hill, but I want to state that I'm a medical patient, I'm a veteran, and I have a bunch of my friends, I have older friends, 75, that use cannabis, oils, all kinds of different rubs, and I want to be able to supply them. Okay, I want to be able to help them out like I've been doing for a long time. I've been in a medical since 1996 when it first started. And I just want to continue what I'm doing. I don't sell it. I help my friends. I make topicals for them. And it does take more leaf, more marijuana to make these different chemicals of rubs for arthritis, for all kinds of pain. And I just want to be able to grow on my property. My property is clean, and my property you can use for an example. I only have just under 5 acres. I could buy the acreage next to me, and which would give me 9.2 acres, which still, not there. But I want to be able to do what I want to do, and hopefully you guys will let me do it on my acres that I do have, which is 4.51 acres. I'm out of everybody's way. I actually help out over there. I mean, I'm trying to make the roads for fire department to come easy, because right now on a couple of those street banks, they can't turn those big trucks. So I'm doing it. I bought a tractor. I'm building a house. My house is almost finished. And I just want to be able to grow and, help my friends out. So that's it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Board. I'm Mary Ellen Souza. I live in Mountain Ranch, specifically in the Cave City area. And because I work, I steal away an hour here or there to come in when I can, and it's difficult that I need to run back to work. But I just wanted to throw in a couple of quick comments. I have not heard the extent of the entire conversation. I do want to say thank you for the efforts. I want to especially recognize Supervisor Garamendi for trying to keep things on track and respectful and keep the discourse civil. So thank you for doing that. It really is appreciated. On a personal note, in terms of where my property lies, there are 2.5 acre minimums. Behind me is an unclassified acreage of 20 acres. My question is, how is that dealt with what you're doing right here? That 20 acres, can someone now grow right behind me so that I'm looking at a grow right behind me, which would encourage people coming across? Fencing does matter, and I understand that the folks that really want to do things legally and do it correct understand security issues. That said, anybody, yes, can jump a fence. But in rural areas, I don't want a liquor store, even though it's legal. I don't want that next door to me any more than I want a pot farm next to me, okay? What I do know on Cave City Road is I stopped jogging and working my dog down my road when the total chaos of all of this erupted. The ban has quieted that down, but as recently as about a month ago, there was a huge bust down the road from me. I am extremely cautious because I'm not going to be a victim. I'm not going to allow my dog to be a victim, and it affects my neighborhood. So has life been calmer since the ban has been in effect? Absolutely. I don't grow it, store it, transport it, eat it, drink it, smoke it, or whatever else you want to do with it. But I respect people's individual rights to do things that do not stomp on my rights. So I would urge you to look at those situations, because they're out there, like my property that butts against a 20 acre. I have no idea if somebody can come in and grow there, and I don't know if you all know yet. So I appreciate you taking a hard look at that. Again, I know the ban has worked for me personally. It's also worked for what I do for a living. I work with adults with developmental disabilities, and I can tell you for a fact that marijuana has an impact, often different than expected, on people with autism and people with underlying mental health conditions. I've seen it, I've lived it with them, and it's not pretty. So again, I'm going to respect individual rights, but I also want to let you know that this is not a can of beer we're talking about. Thanks so much, and again, appreciate the civil discourse.
Hi, everybody. I didn't intend to speak today, but I've heard a lot of things that affect me personally and communally that I feel like I feel like I have to speak up. I feel like I have to stand up for the little guy. Some of you know me, Jack, Peter, some of you new people, first time you're going to meet me, but I'm what you would consider the good player, right? Peter actually helped me out, and this is one of the things I wanted to talk about. You guys said you needed to have a temporary state ID, or the state licensing. I was one of the very first, and Peter can verify it if you don't believe me, I was one of the very first people to pass. When Courtney Meinhardt came to my facility, he left my place shaking my hand saying, "This is the best place I've ever been to. I don't have trash. I do have kids. I have a family. I'm actually the leader of my home. I have an 87-year-old woman, a 56-year-old man, a 23-year-old girl, a 2-year-old daughter, and a almost 2-month-old baby coming up. I take care of us all, and because I do things the right way, I've always done them the right way. I don't want to look over my back. I don't want to look over my shoulder. When I had to re-register for my second time because I was one of the first ones to be approved, Peter actually helped me out, and what happened was there was an error in the office. I don't know if you recall this, and because of that, I wasn't able to reapply for my licensing. Well, I knew the ban was coming. I knew all those things were coming, but again, I wanted to stay in compliance. I went to Peter. He reissued me a license, and in the time that it had taken them to reissue me, we were banned. So the state temporary didn't actually go through on my end. And again, I'm one of the good people. Another thing that's an important thing to notice is RR. I know that's a huge discussion. I know that's a big thing. I have over 20 acres. I have 20-point-something acres. I'm in Mountain Ranch. I'm far away from everybody. When you guys have a 100-foot setback, I tripled it. When you guys say you want this, I tripled them. I did it all the right way. The problem with eliminating us RRs or RTs or whatever you want to call it is we are the good ones. We're the ones that paid our taxes on time. We're the ones that never complained. We're the ones that always complied. I'm the one that abated the day that you guys told me to. I haven't had a plan out since. And now I hear things like we're going to go to indoor and this, that, and the other, yet still, the little guy, RR, or RT, or whatever the hell you want to call it, can't do anything. And what you're doing is you're opening up for those who do have a lot of money to come in, and you're just going to eliminate the locals. You're eliminating the people that actually spend their money here, like me. I hope that you're willing to look into it, and if it comes to indoor and indoor only, I hope you accept RT or RR or whatever. Again, I got 20 acres. Maybe it's got to be a case-by-case judgment, but if we're going to hold everyone to a standard, let's hold everyone to a standard.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Did you know the lingering, powerful, nauseating stench, skunk-like smell of marijuana farms can carry over half a mile? That's 2,600 feet and beyond, forcing neighbors inside their homes. I wanted to talk about code compliance. My neighborhood has been working with code compliance since April of 2016 to get a couple of properties where people are camping to deal with those issues. As of today, and these places, these properties in my neighborhood have no house, no water, no well, no septic, no electricity, and as of today, they're still living there. And it's a few different properties. And I have called code compliance along with neighbors multiple times, written emails, sent complaints over the last 3 years, and they're still there. So for those of you watching at home, don't be fooled thinking code compliance can take care of those issues. The other thing I want to talk about, which nobody talked about today, is the water tables. The water tables in Copperopolis are low to none. Drawing the groundwater near our residential area could severely impact the local residents' wells. We don't have city water available to us. We are dependent on our wells. And of the houses in my area, a few of them run out of water during the summer already. That's how low the tables are. So, per the EIR, A 22,000 square foot outdoor grow requires 400,000 gallons of water. So we're upping that now to 1 acre. That's 800,000 gallons of water. And each parcel can have 5 grows. So now we're talking about 4 million gallons of water per parcel with 5 grows. That's enough water to support 27 people for 1 year. You really need to address this issue before you come up with a permanent ordinance. Somehow, some way, it needs to be in there where you take a look at the water tables, and if they don't support that kind of activity, then the permit cannot be issued. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Terry McBride, Mountain Ranch. Yeah, my hat is off to you guys. It was a joy to watch you discuss, even in disagreement. It's what I would love to see our supervisors do every week. It really made me proud of every single one of you. I don't agree with a couple of you, and you know it, but I was really impressed with today's meeting. I am for this grow, you guys know that. I've spoken of it a few times. I understand her concern about water. Mine, I had to replace my pump. I was surrounded by illegal grows. So, I mean, there are ways to work with that. If you got a water issue, have them truck the water in. It was done before. Rancher up by us made lots of money providing water as needed for the growers. So that can be done. And I'm still completely for it because I see what these people are like. I see them as family folk. I see them as people that love this county. I see them as people that are going to let our local businesses cash registers start ringing and bringing in money and bringing on hiring, because we have some of the highest unemployment in this county, and it's going to help with that. I see them as a positive part of our community, and I'm grateful that you guys are going to give them the chance to do that. And don't make it so onerous that we lose the good guys. Work with, sometimes you're just going to have to, we don't have round pegs up here. Everybody's going to be a little bit different, like that young man that was just speaking and that type of stuff. We're going to have to work with them a bit. But I do support very much allowing the grows. I think what you came up with seemed awfully reasonable to me. I don't grow. I mean, I'm getting nothing out of this. Don't think I do. But I'm happy to see that you guys are working on this and bringing it together. And I'd love to be able to go to a budget meeting, you guys, in a year or two, say, oh my gosh, we have enough money. Right? Won't that be a first? Marita, how often has that happened in the past? Wouldn't it be nice to take some of that money? Her comments last week about the buildings up in her area are totally valid. Why not find a way to help fund those organizational buildings that would provide disaster help to folks during a fire? You're going to be able to now. You're going to have the funding come in. And I think that is powerful, and you can use that money to fund other organizations, other good groups, the library and such. Anyway, thank you.
Hi, my name is Jason DeSalvatore. I just want to say I support the direction that the board's going in. Watching all the comments and the discussion today, just a comment regarding the distribution, which came up. There was debates about different license types. There's actually multiple different tiers of distribution licenses through the BCC in the state of California. The lower level tier is a self-distribution only license. It's a type 13 distribution license. That's a much lower tier, much lower flat fee based on how much revenue you create as a distributor. It only allows you to transport and sell your own product. So I think that kind of fits with how you guys were kind of classify that and might be an easy solution. And just want to reiterate that we support the direction that the board's going in.
Doc, Sandy, somebody's got to come up.
Mexican standoff. I can't get my PC to unlock. Sorry about that. Sandy Mitrat, D2. wanted to again reiterate, I support commercial cannabis in Calaveras County. And it wasn't always that way, but I stand before you today as one who sees the value. My gravest concern, and I wanted to bring that forward, is overall county capability. And that's on multiple levels, and I'm not saying that we can't do this, but I'm saying we might want to consider approaching it a little bit differently than we have in the past. As a seasoned program and project manager, I stand before you today in support of a controlled deployment associated with a new regulatory program, and I think that's how we are proposing approaching this. But what I want to toss out there is whether or not the county could possibly consider using an iterative model when crafting the program deployment strategy that you use. So let me take a few minutes to explain, and it maps to the handout that I very quickly crafted. It's called an iterative model, and it's an implementation approach that focuses on an initial simplified implementation, which then progressively gains more complexity. After an initial planning phase, a small handful of stages are repeated over and over. You get better and better at what you do, with each completion of the cycle incrementally improving or growing that iterative process. Enhancements to the program can be quickly recognized and implemented throughout each iteration, allowing the next phase loop to be at least marginally better than the last one. So when you look at the handout I gave you, the phases include planning and requirements. You map out the high-level project. You do that in an initial stage of planning. You establish clear requirements, and you generally prepare for the upcoming stages when you do that. Then you step into analysis and design, and some of that involves nailing down the phase content and the details required for each stage of the project. You then establish technical requirements that can be utilized in order to meet the given needs of each iteration that you ultimately plan out. Then you work towards implementation, and that's when you actually do the work. You test, and by that I mean you come back and you say, what worked well in this phase? What do we change? What do we modify? And then you do an evaluation of the overall deployment at that level. The thing that I'm asking for is that we start small and somewhat controlled, create phases, clear timelines and schedules, and enhance the current iteration when the county feels they can truly support it. And I think that was the biggest problem with the urgency ordinance.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Dr. Burpana Randall Smith, District 4. I'd like to congratulate everybody, but I'm going to get right to the two items. Regarding distribution, I want to clarify that it is possible to hold a distribution license and another license. And we have an entity in this county now that has that without being a micro business. Little Trees has its cultivation license, which is separate from its dispensary or retail license. And the reason is the two activities are on separate premises. They're in the same building, but the premises are separate. So it is possible to allow distribution, allow growers to have a distribution license. They would have two separate licenses, and as long as there's no doors between the two, as long as they're on separate premises, they could be on the same parcel, but they have to be separate premises. So you can do distribution type 11, not type 13. It is possible to hold two licenses. Microbusiness requires you have 3 of the 4 activities, which is a different question. So it is possible, it is doable. Next, I'd like to address item number 3 on conditional approval. Supervisor Mills, I'm impressed today with you. I have to say, you've been pretty reasonable on a lot of items, but on this one, I think you got something wrong. The idea was not to let people have a bonfire, AKA grow. The idea was to allow people to have their mothers and their clones and basically keep their genetics going and keep it safe so that when they get their license, then they can put those in the ground and grow. Nobody's talking about a conditional approval to grow. It's about preparation. It's about protecting genetics. And so what I'd like to, bring it back that it would help everybody literally save 3-4 months of time if you allow people under some kind of conditional approval. For example, the county can say yes to the state application upon receipt of the application. I mean, they're in compliance. When you apply, you may have not been permitted, but you're complying with the law, and on that basis, the county could say yes to the state, and of course, nobody puts their plants in the ground and flowers their plants unless they have both of those, the state and the local permission acquired. So no one's talking about growing or doing anything without both, but we're talking about the preparation of the clones and the mothers. And then, yeah, that's pretty much that. I have 20 seconds. You know, I am impressed at this meeting today. It's probably been the best meeting on this issue we've seen yet through all these years. I appreciate the input. The 5-0s blow my mind on a number of issues. I would love to see a 5-0 vote today on this ordinance. I think it would be a great thing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doc.
Hey, good afternoon, Carlos Boyle, District 1. I want to reiterate what Doc Smith was saying. You know, I'm really impressed with the conversation we had today. Everyone kept a really open mind. I think we're actually talking about real issues now, and we're being receptive and trying to make good common sense solutions to a lot of these problems that we've been dealing with. That being said, I want to just point out some things that were said today, and in defense of the growers. I guess one of the first things that was mentioned was how we were dragging out the permitting process during the UO, and I know a lot of this is really unnecessary to say, but I just have to say in defense to the growers that the UO was really a mess. There was no real clear direction. So if things were dragged out, they may look like they were dragged out, but we were told we needed permits for some things and we didn't need permits for some things, and it may have looked like we were dragging them out, but we were all just trying to stay alive, trying to stay afloat, and trying to get our ducks in line without getting swallowed up by the program that was just trying to figure itself out, really. So just keep that in mind. We weren't really pushing this. It's really sad to see RR go down. I know the biggest problem is odor and traffic, and if that's really a big problem, I think we really need to look at that through a different lens. Odor and traffic really are things that I think we should be able to deal with. The odor really is only bad for 4 weeks out of the year. Realistically, it's only 4 weeks out of the whole entire year. If you really have an issue with it, keep your windows closed. When we have fires and there's ash and smoke all around, we keep our windows closed because we can't take that smell, and that's just part of life. We're living with other people. We don't live in a bubble. So not to take away from the importance of that, but just different perspective there. Setbacks. We're dealing with these arbitrary numbers. I think what the woman said earlier. This smell does travel. 75 feet, 100 feet, 1,000 feet isn't going to do anything. So, these numbers are arbitrary. We're just picking them out of thin air. I think if you're ag zone and you're surrounded by other ag land, having a 75-foot setback is kind of silly. There's nothing there that you're backed up against. So, yeah. Other than that, I think we made some really good progress today, and I really appreciate us being able to move forward here. And try to put something together that makes sense and works for the majority of people. So I'm really grateful for that, and thank you guys.
Mr. Polcher.
Good afternoon. I'd like to thank staff and the board for their hard work on this issue. Chair, if I may, could we please scroll down to a certain number on this so I could look at the exact language? Number 15, if that pleases the board. So I would like to suggest, I think that, we're thinking the same thing. I'm just concerned with how the language is there. I would suggest instead of saying 20 acres per premises, max 5, 1 acre of canopy per 20 acres. So basically, it would allow for smaller license types to aggregate. Because, there were a lot of people with 5,000 and 10,000 square feet that were displaced. I see it as no further impact to the property because you're not allowing more than 1 acre. It would just be a higher number of license types, but no additional canopy. So just a suggestion on that. The more important one that I see, And I'll act a little dramatic here and say it's mutually assured destruction. Number 3, if we can't get some kind of conditional local approval saying that, we check all the boxes, we can now proceed with applying for our state license. I'm not saying to cultivate, I'm not saying to turn anything on, I'm just saying begin the annual licensure process. I don't have a crystal ball, but I'm assuming planning department's going to have, somewhat of a heavy lift on this. I mean, I know that many of these sites have already been approved, so I'm assuming to be a shorter process on those facilities. But if we're looking at several months of waiting to get planning's approval, then we have to start the state annual license process. 2020 is not going to happen, and I can tell you, speaking as a business owner and a farmer, no 2018 crop, no 2019 crop, and no 2020 crop, you're never going to get a penny of Measure C taxes out of me ever again. And I'm not saying that as a threat, it's just the simple fact that we cannot stand 3 years down. So all I'm asking for, and I'd ask County Council to look into the city of La Habra and West Sacramento. I've spoke to an attorney today that has started licensure process with these municipalities where they've done exactly this. I don't think this is a stretch. We're not asking to turn on early. We're not asking to conduct business. All we're asking is to concurrently start our state license process. And at the end of it, if we get turned down by the state and we get turned down by you guys, we're out the money. I mean, it doesn't hurt you guys, and no one starts sooner than they would without full approval from local and state permitting authorities. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Board of Supervisors. Lance Ranke from Angels Camp. Seems sad that we're back here reviewing a regulation again. I'm definitely in support of the ban, which I think has been effective, and it has allowed the county to get back on its feet and gotten rid of a lot of bad animosities. I have so many more concerns than I can ever address in 3 minutes of time. So I'll try and just go over a few that are concerns that I have, that I don't see that the board has done a lot of serious research into the laws of the state of California regarding cannabis. Supervisor Mills brought up one of the items that I had as a concern, which was over the past 3 years of growing under the urgency ordinance, we haven't had any accounting. We have no idea what kind of revenue has been brought in to the county and the expenses that we put out in support of the UO. That is really disconcerting to me, that we'd have no idea how much money we spent. And that includes the lawsuits, support of those lawsuits, and all of the legal actions that have been taken by the county. The other item that has really bothered me has been the acceptance of large cash payments to the county, which to me seems that the county is involved in money laundering. You can't go into a bank or things and go do and just put down cash. Anything I do with the county, I don't send in cash when I pay my $10,000 in property tax bill. I write a check. Everything is tracked. They know where that money comes from. When you receive cash like that, you're putting a liability on the county. Other concern that I have is that California Cannabis and other reliable reporting has estimated that California overproduces commercial cannabis by about 60 to 75%. And also that's the same in Oregon and the same in Colorado. In addition, most of the cannabis grown in California has not passed the stringent testing program set up by Cal Cannabis. So therefore, what's happened is most of the
Thank you very much, Mr. Ranke.
That's 3 minutes?
Goes quick. Ms. Ranke.
Good afternoon, Vicki Ranke.
Angels Camp. And just one of the things, I took notes from the meeting prior, and one of the things in the note that I didn't hear today was that the previous qualified growers who are in full compliance with the ban can apply with the permit. And that was very clearly stated, but I didn't hear that today, so I'd like that clarified, if that's the case, because all these growers are now, if they haven't cleaned up their properties, they're in violation of the ban. And of course, I'm here to say that I also represent Crackham, Calaveras Residents Against Commercial Marijuana, and we are against this. We are in support of the ban. And the ban is here. People today are talking like we have no ban and that they're all getting ready to go to regulation, which has not been approved yet. So I'm here to say that we need to continue the ban because, you know, what makes us think that it's going to be any different this time when you start trying to regulate again and letting people know that we're open to regulation, we'll be flooded again with probably a lot of illegals and people trying to be legal. The Sheriff Department continues to eradicate illegal grows even though we have a ban, but at least they can determine what is an illegal grow because right now we have a ban. With regulation, you know, I'm sure we'll get more illegals coming back in, hiding between the people who want to be permitted. It's just the nature of the game and we don't want it here. I will remind you again about Measure D, which I know Marita knows very well because she was one of the signers on that proposal, and that it failed in our county. The people said no to regulation. I know I've gotten up here and said this a million times. The marijuana industry turns a county into a place that is not safe for people and kids. And we're talking about 190 permits that were given out, and then you keep saying, well, we should start little. So what happens when some of the growers are allowed to grow and some are said, well, sorry, but you're not going to get to grow? What do you think is going to happen? What do you think lawsuits are going to come flooding into this county again, costing our taxpayers the money to pay for all these? Again, very upsetting because from the day one, we've all said no to this industry. We haven't gone to vote on it except on Measure D, and nobody will. We were stopped twice on trying to put a ban, and those were stopped by the marijuana grow organizations because they knew it would pass here in Calaveras and we would be done. We would have had a ban. Anyway,
Very much,
thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Carol Couchman. I'm District 2. I'm also a partner in Peace of Mind, Health, and Wellness. Attorney General William Barr in January 2019 committed to not use the limited resources of the Department of Justice to prosecute state-regulated and compliant cannabis businesses. His response came in from questions from Senator Cory Booker from New Jersey and Kamala Harris from California. With 47 states having laws on the books that defy the Schedule I status of cannabis, it makes no sense to continue the joke of prohibition at the federal level, and I believe that's going to change in the near future. The ban was not a success. The ban has devastating consequences to this county. Most businesses I have spoken to have seen a 40% drop in business and are just trying to hang on and not go out of business. That's what a ban has done to us. The number of vacant buildings in this county is unbelievable, and the ban crowd doesn't care. They are wrong on so many levels. They're very vocal, but they are in the minority. Most residents in this county support a cannabis industry, but the scare tactics and bullying that have been used for the past 3 years have made everyone sick and tired of the whole thing. When they're talking about odors, I had a squab farm. I had odors. I lived by dairies. There were odors. I have cows on my property now, and they poop and they stink. Odors are a fact of life when you are in the agricultural industry. Get over the odors. Good gracious. State regulators have voted to allow delivery of cannabis even in banned counties and cities. You're going to have delivery services coming in from other counties to deliver cannabis products, and this county will get nothing. No tax money. I'm encouraged that you're looking at setting up regulation today. Many of us are just hanging on by a thread, and we need to get back to work. We want to be good neighbors, and we placed our garden in a location that is private and not bothering anyone. We have spent thousands of dollars to comply with the urgency ordinance regulations. There are lots of ways to get this industry launched again, but if it becomes too expensive, many of us won't be able to make it. And like Mr. Bolger said, we can't run a business and not be able to do business for 2 to 3 years and have a business at all. We have to get back to work. It's also imperative that we have all levels of the industry in this county. All my business needs is an infusion and packaging license. I just take cannabis oil, infuse it into an herbal base, and make topical products out of it. I don't need a manufacturing, I just need infusion and cannabis. Thank you.
Thank you. Tom?
Good afternoon. So far this has been a really positive study session. Glad to be here. Especially Supervisor Callaway, I appreciate your position and conviction on personal cultivation, and I hope you can bring 2 more supervisors along before it's over. In the meantime, thanks for biting the bullet and supporting the lesser of 2 evils so we don't all get deprived of personal in the county-wide, since that was the other option. And since you left it open for, the board left it open for future discussion, I just kind of want to quickly mention setbacks. A lot of people, myself included, have already had to move their farm once to meet a change in setbacks from 30 to 75 feet, costing me well over $10,000, including ripping out and replacing newly installed fencing, adding 200 yards of trenching and plumbing, installing a new irrigation system. And if you talk about changing setbacks, consider the environmental implications, how many trees we'd have to chop down, and all the more grading that would incur, including just flat growing area and roads and more to meet those requirements. All the crazy engineering and grading permits, because the board claims we aren't ag and aren't covered by the ag grading exemption, and how much of our money this would waste, our problem, I guess. Please think really hard before you consider changing setbacks in the future. There's a lot to that. And I understand the reason the sheriff wants discretion to disqualify applicants on a case-by-case basis. I talked to him about it a minute ago. And this is not a criticism of his fairness. It's acknowledgement that he's human. And I have trouble with the idea that anybody's fate, let alone a whole bunch of people, be left to the discretion of any one man without having the standards those decisions are based on articulated. I know it's challenging, but it's probably, I think it's doable. This is the essential difference between a ministerial and a discretionary permit process. You can't have discretion and call it ministerial. I want to acknowledge a misconception on my part when I wrote an email to board members last night. I was in error about the county's role in background checks for employees, inhibiting our ability to move quickly to mobilize labor. That's a state issue. I was mistaken, my bad. And having said all that, with a couple of minor caveats, which other people have already brought to your attention, I just want to congratulate you overall on a job well done and say this was the least crazy cannabis regulation board deliberation I've ever witnessed, and I've witnessed them all. Thanks.
Sue? How many other speakers do we have? Kevin? Tricia? And one more. 3. Is that it? 4, 5. All right, get up there. Sue?
Basically, I just want to say thanks to, for a return towards sanity and watching some working together up there that I haven't seen before. And I've been at most of these too. I don't grow, I don't even use, but the neighborhood I live in is basically 40-acre RR parcels. And I see from the little map that only 2 of my neighbors were actually registered and doing it all according to the rules. But the others were good neighbors too, and they've quit. And I don't know what's going to happen on these parcels. I don't know who my new neighbors would be, and I don't know, it's not a pretty enough area for anybody in their right mind to buy it for retirement or for like recreation. And so I think the land right now, what it's good for is growing. And I'm concerned that the property value will go down because it doesn't look like it's going to be permitted there. But in spite of that, in spite of the fact that I might not be able to sell that to somebody and it might not be a pretty place for me to rebuild, I still am grateful that you did what you did today. Thanks.
Someone's got to step up.
Hello, Board. Trevor Whitkey, Calaveras Cannabis Alliance, and I want to thank all of you. I want to thank staff and everyone who's been involved in this process. This has been 3 years of our lives. My son is 4 years old, and the last time I wasn't dealing with cannabis issues, he was 2 months old. So the entire life of my son has been consumed by these discussions and these meetings, and I think Tom is right. This has been the most civil, most productive discussion we've seen. I want to thank both Supervisor Mills and Supervisor Tofinelli. I think the two of you have shown an ability and a willingness to compromise and to consider the issues in a way that, to be honest, surprised me. We've very rarely, if ever, seen eye to eye, and I think the two of you have, in the 5-0 votes, taken the time and the energy to consider the issues in a reasonable fashion and have made very reasonable decisions, and I appreciate that. Supervisor Garamendi, Supervisor Marita Callaway, Supervisor Stopper, thank you all for hearing us, for listening to the community. We've spoken loud and clear on these issues. We've gone over it, we've rehashed it, we've had dozens upon dozens of meetings, and I feel now more than ever we're actually working in a way that's collaborative and constructive and providing an opportunity for us to move forward. We got 5-0 votes on a number of the questions that came before us. That is huge. That shows that there is unanimous consensus on certain areas for moving forward. And I think Supervisor Garamendi made a great point. Markets improve efficiency. The more that the market is able to operate and the more that we're able to have good businesses operating under their own self-interested principles of free market capitalism, they're going to do things like put in fences with locks and gates and incur those costs simply to protect their own interest. They're going to put security cameras in simply to protect their interest. They're going to go over and above the standards that you're creating because it's going to be beneficial for their own businesses. And I think that that's something that's a bright spot for all of us. We are going to be able to move forward with best practices and best standards coming from the state and replicated here at the county level. Sandy Maitrot made some great points. We learned a lot under the urgency ordinance. Clearly staff has taken monumental task that was the urgency ordinance, processed all the information and the data, and condensed it down to 30 questions. Like, we have really done a lot, and I want to commend every one of us. I think that Calaveras County is farther along and farther ahead than anybody else in the state, and it's because of the work of staff, it's because of the work of this community. Thank you.
Very much. Neil, Patricia, who's coming up?
Water prices are being subsidized by water ratepayers because CCWD sells it back cheap. And I see people going up my road with a lot of water every day in the back of their trucks. I don't know what they do with it, but I also see trucks going up my road that have barrels that are laying down as they go up, and they're food grade, and when they go back down the road, they're upright. I don't know what's in those barrels. One time I smelled something like butane or propane or something, and I reported it. But anyway, and then there's the shooting. They're shooting on one side, they're shooting on the other side, they're shooting all around. And why? I don't know. But to me, it's kind of like they're warning you, don't go close. On this plan that you guys have, the principals are not required to live on the site, therefore passing on responsibilities to the person who happens to be there when something goes down, like calling for help and having the person called come and murder 3 people. If you don't want to call it that, they are dead just the same. Why? Because pot has a higher monetary value than some grapes. It's not the same thing. The utopia of regulation enforcement is ignoring human nature. There are not enough people in this county to enforce the regulations, just like there are an estimated 1,200 grows out there as we speak. I heard no mention of charcoal filters to make sure that that smell doesn't escape those buildings. And I believe that this is corrupting people, especially people that aren't able to pay their taxes. The general plan has a map. The proposed map is on the wall in the foyer. There is no such map out there showing the present day map to compare with the zoning. When going to the planning office, they said I could go to the library. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Neil? How many other speakers do we have? I've got Kevin standing. Jen, are you up? Going once, going twice. Okay, wrap it up.
Good evening. I think you've done some very good work here, and I don't want to criticize, but I think there are a couple of things I just want to point out that might be helpful. I think if we had used the very expensive GIS system that we've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on to project on the screen to see the impacts of what choices you were making would have been very helpful. But that my recommendation wasn't listened to on that one. So we move forward. 68% of total farms are in D2. I know you know that, Jack. 29 farms in D2 are between 5 acres and 20 acres. And between 10 and 20 acres, there are only 7 U and 2 RR. There are no farms in Copperopolis, so we don't really have to worry about the water table over there. There is one 18.8 acre farm in Wallace, 2 farms in Angels Camp that are 19.83 and 19.99 acres. I think that, well, we know that the rezoning is going to follow the general plan update, and this can resolve much of the haphazard zoning that exists now. To force us to spend an additional $390,000 to rezone will only overburden staff and prevent them from doing the rezoning that they're supposed to be focused on for the general plan update. Ministerial permits seem to be the most efficient means to administer the program. I think CUP is more than necessary at this point, and most critically, there needs to be the dual track. To get this done, as you are finalizing this, to allow us to get state approval, not to, as everyone has stated, not to start, but to get everything done so it's done before the end of the year. Because come the end of the year, as far as my understanding is, we lose our provisional license. And then we go to the back of the line for 6,000 applications that are ahead of us, and they're only processing 40 a week. I mean, that's years. And I think that's the majority of it. Oh, I just learned this past week that Calaveras County sprayed 347 gallons of glyphosate over 231 acres along 500 miles of roadway. And the total acreage of commercial cultivation was only 58 acres. It's just an interesting comparison to who's really poisoning our county. Thank you.
Kevin?
Wow, what a meeting. You guys are great. I'm serious. There was a lot of time and effort and you took time out of your life and day to do this. Democracy in action. I'm having a great time. Okay, I'm going to get to some of the issues. Generators off-grid issue. I'm off-grid, so I guess that's my problem. I don't think anything's going to change. I like the state laws, the state rules, but anyway. The background checks. Oh, leave setbacks alone. My parcel's 1,350 square feet. 1,350 feet square. Let me give you some alternatives. Don't take the setbacks and apply them to all the properties. If you want to set back different for the smaller ones, tier the setbacks. Have 75 for the small one or 150 for smaller ones if you think that there's more houses close. Out in my properties, there's no house close, period. And you might also, then the second thing, if you don't want to tier them, and you do want to leave them, if you want to change them, you could also take a setback if it has it was too close in proximity to a neighbor's property, house, then you could also add that in to be one of the cases. So that's some ideas I think you should consider because setbacks are a problem. Background checks. Oh my God. I don't like to give anybody control over making decisions, and I was one of the registrants who got approved against a negative response from the sheriff. Now, I don't have time to go into that unless you want to stop the clock and I'll tell you the story, but I was overridden by Mr. Moore and approved. It was a ridiculous thing that came out of something, so I don't like the background checks. Also, seasonal employees. If you want a background check, everybody, make sure that the sheriff is on our schedule. So we don't have to go get 20 seasonal employees, have a line, and we're 30 minutes late for them to close. So make the rules that he has to comply with concise, accessible, and reasonable for us in business. Remediation, $5,000 bond. If you want a bond, make it $50,000. Make it have some teeth. $5,000 is ridiculous. Remediation, let the owner do it and let him go as long as he's doing it in good faith. Appeals process. I like the language from the, I'm sorry, you could steal the language for the appeals process so that if there were denial, we could appeal to the board. I would love that process, and you could probably steal the language from the CUP guidelines in some of the ordinances. Now, thank you for chasing out the bad guys with the ban. Thank you for that, because now what's left are the good guys. Remember that when you pass the laws. Thank you. Really, thank you from my heart.
Jen, you'll be our last speaker. Sorry.
Good afternoon. What a productive day. You know, when there's a compromise, neither side is entirely happy, and I see a lot of unhappy people on both sides. Those that know me know this affects me deeply. I'm not going to be able to farm on my property, but I'm still here for the fight because this is what's right. That being said, I encourage you guys to look at co-location and clustering. You're going to have over 100 farms that can no longer apply, that are no longer viable in this county. They're going to need to relocate, or they're going to need to rezone. This is even more cumbersome work upon our staff. So let's get these people moving. Let's get them either purchasing new property, finding a way to co-locate, so that we can get the tax revenue running into this county's coffers. So that's just kind of a personal point for me. But I think we need to be aware that this is going to take time. And if we don't have the dual track system of having permission to apply to the state, we are looking at probably 18 months to 2 years for any relocating farm to start business again. I know some of you don't care about those that have to relocate, but if we want a sustainable industry in this county, we need to care about those that chose to apply and stand up and go through this regulatory process from the beginning. Sorry. Technology. Setbacks. I'd like to encourage you to think about setbacks when the property is co-owned by the same owner. These setbacks, I think, are sometimes arbitrary, and we shouldn't be having to set back from our own property lines. In some cases, that puts the cultivation site in a worse location, both environmentally and from public view, when we're subject to arbitrary setbacks, especially when it's from our own. And finally, I think we need to advocate for a cannabis program manager to make sure timelines by both the applicant and the county are adhered to. We experienced a lot of bottlenecks, and dare I say selective enforcement and selective application processing this last time, and that needs to be avoided, and I think that can be done with somebody managing the program. Not that our planning department hasn't done an excellent job with the workload that they have and the staff that they have, but let's make this efficient this time. Let's get this right this time so that it's here for the long haul and we don't have to go through this again. Thanks for everything.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? We're good. Seeing none, we will close public comment. I'll bring it back to the board. This is a study session, so there's no action item. Is there further discussion on behalf of the board or things that you might want to add into the mix as we go forward? And Peter, as we wrap this up, I'd like you to explain clearly what our process is from this point. Maybe that's a good spot to start.
Okay, I guess, first of all, is there any of these issues that the board wants to revisit based on public comment?
Supervisor Callaway?
Yeah, I guess I'd like to look at the distribution one again, and we've heard different stories, so I'd look to see what is it that is allowed or isn't allowed, being that I looked at sole distribution. The owner could distribute their own product, and I heard different things today. From several people, we've heard about being able to submit to the state as well as while they're doing the county process. I mean, either we're going to hold people up, and because it is critical, that's one of the reasons that we're sort of pushing for it now, is so those people who had their temporary license and were banned can now go back and get their provisional license. And if they have to wait to apply for that while waiting for our process to start, then we could reach the end of the year. And I think we should consider that. The woman that spoke about water tables, I thought that was a valid concern, but I understood that the State Water Control Board had to get permits from them anyway. Is something changed on that would deal with that?
So the water board talks about surface water runoff and pollution issues, not necessarily groundwater supply and availability.
Okay, so when we do a subdivision, people have to prove water and the water table. And if the famous one in Gary's area, where there was going to be a huge take of the groundwater, and that was one of the many reasons of turning down the project, is that an issue that we should be dealing with in this case? We allow groundwater use for golf courses, for other ag products. Is there something different we should be doing here that we are or are not doing elsewhere?
Well, these are policy calls by the board. If that's something you want us to include in an ordinance, then we would need to know.
No, I guess my question is we already have like a system in place. Is there any need for us to do something special?
There isn't a system in place. If you're building a house and you are serving the house by a well, you have to demonstrate that you have potable water. But we do not have a minimum standard as far as the amount of water. You can do storage. So when we do a subdivision, for example, or some other larger discretionary permit approval, we do look at the likely capability of groundwater to serve the project if that's what's proposed. It's very difficult to actually prove that there will be sufficient groundwater over time to serve the project. We can do some, in some areas we have actual groundwater table that you can do some testing and look at drawdown. But for the most part in the county, we have a fractured rock system that testing won't necessarily provide any data as to the long-term effect of a well on someone else's well versus how long that groundwater source may produce at the level that a pump test would create at that time.
And one more item I have, if I heard correctly from public comment, I think we should consider allowing starter plants if they've gone through the process. But I heard a commitment from those people that spoke that there's no turning on the lights or planting them in the ground, but the possibility of at least getting started for what will take a few months to go through the county and maybe longer for the state, I'm not sure. So those are my 3 areas of things I'd like us to consider.
Okay, we've got 10 minutes left on the DVD, and then we're going to have to break and reconvene. Are there other comments from the board?
So let's be real quick.
Here's where we're at. Otherwise, if we don't get it done in 10, we're not going to be done until 30.
And speaking to the water table issue, I was in a conference with DWR up in Placerville here within the last 30 days, speaking to the issue of ag efficiency, and that the state is not going to relent on that one. So where there is no proven water or there is a questionable water source, that is going to play into some decisions that are going to be made here in the near future. Secondly, I think that the bonding, as we look at it, I don't know if you have the ability to get insurance on your car or bonding for something. Oftentimes, $1 million bond is the starting point. It's not the end point. And so maybe a $5,000 bond for a potential future cleanup is way too low in this discussion. So those are the 2 things I think that really kind of hinge. Also, very quickly about money laundering. If the county wants to receive money, maybe they set it up in advance to do it so that there's no cash received, so that we can actually go through it and follow federal regulations in the receipt of money, so we don't have to deal with why I voted no on returning that money last time. Thank you.
Supervisor Stopper.
Just number 3, I brought up when applying to the state for a permit, applicant shall be provided by the county a conditional local authorization letter to facilitate the state licensure process. One of the comments had brought up La Habra in West Sacramento as using that process. I had been able to also find that through a simple Google search. So if you could look into that as we proceed into the future, I would like that to be considered.
Thank you. Seeing no further lights on, Peter, why don't you tell us what our next steps are and how this is going to work out?
So then it comes back to staff. I'll be working with county council to craft a draft ordinance. We will revisit the environmental document, determine whether or not we can use that EIR, or if there's substantive changes that need to go back to some other type of environmental review. Once we've completed that process, we then set it for hearing before the Planning Commission. They would make a recommendation to the board and back here for adoption hearing. Sounds like a very simple process, but it's
we know better.
It's not going to happen overnight.
Thank you. What's your timeline?
I'm really reluctant to.
It's like I got 3 minutes left till that tape runs out.
I'm reluctant to say, oh, we'll get it done in X number of weeks or months, because I really don't know. We need to sit down and figure out, the writing of the ordinance, along with everything else on our plate right now. I can say it will be at least 3 to 4 months, just in the bare minimum necessary for noticing requirements, and then whatever time is necessary for the actual work to be done to craft this ordinance.
Can I ask that maybe in the next couple of weeks, as you dig through this, I know we've got a lot of general plan on the plate, if you could perhaps, either an announcement or even agenda item, get up and let us know sort of how you see this timeline coming together.
We can give you an update of where we're at.
Update on where we're at, just so we keep everybody knowing how our path is.
Okay. I wanted to, a couple of the issues that were brought up, I don't have a problem with concurrent processing. I don't know that the state would allow it unless we actually give them an authorization, but if that's something that the majority of the board wants to allow, there's really nothing that would prohibit us from letting someone applying to the state at the same time. I just don't know if the state would allow it. The state would accept an application that we're just saying, there's an application in process here. But I'd have to do some more research on that.
Supervisor Toffenelli?
I would be in favor of it, that's fine.
Supervisor Stopper? All right, Supervisor Mills? Yes. Supervisor Callaway? Yes. I'm a yes too, so 4 and I'm going to bet Supervisor Stopper, I will not speak for Supervisor Stopper, I will wait. Supervisor Stopper, are you okay with concurrent registration? Yes. Yes. Thank you. 5-0, that's our second one. So that should give you some direction. I want to, before we run out of time, I want to do 2 things. I want to thank the citizens of this county for showing up and being very respectful participants in this. We really reflected well on our community. Thank you very much. And I think I'd say that on behalf of the board. I also want to thank...
I applaud you all.
I also want to thank our staff. You guys did a great job. This is a very logical rollout, and the prep was much appreciated on all sides. So Julie, Peter, Ethan, and all your team, thank you very much for doing this. And finally, I'd like to thank my fellow board members. I think we did some good work today. So with that, we stand adjourned.